CanHammer is a gaming podcast from the Great White North. See canhammer.ca for more info.
Good evening and welcome to CanHammer, your stop for Warhammer 40k from the Great White North. Today's show is episode 129. It's a 40k show all about the Drukhari. As usual, I'm your host Chris, and I'm joined by a special guest from Barrie, Mr.
Skari. Ah, the Dark Kin. That's how it's said, everyone.
Yeah, so you listened to the last cast where somebody tried to get our best impersonations. I think I was the closest. I'm going to say that.
I'll give it to you because you're the host.
Okay, awesome. That's all that matters. And we have another guest joining us from London, Mr.
Dan Platt.
Awesome. So you two guys have both been on the cast before, but it's been a while, right? So how are you guys doing?
I'm thinking I'm volunteering Ribbon to go first.
Oh, well, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you very much. Living the dream, you know, like this new book is got me drooling by all the right bits.
Well, wow. I don't know what that means.
That was such a dark Eldar way to say that. Oh my god.
And just very excited to be back on the show and talk to all the 40k fans out there because, oh my goodness, Vector's coming for you.
Yeah, and then Dan, he basically disappeared for, I don't know, 8 months, 6 months. I can't even remember. I can't even count how many months you've been gone, buddy.
It feels like years. It feels like a long, long time. But I'm coming back.
Yeah, because you played what, one tournament in the last 6 months? 3? 2?
Yeah, something like that.
You came to the Bash though.
You did Barrie.
I did come to Barrie Bash. Yep.
And that was it, right?
I think so. It's been a while. I'm doing a lot of hobby-oriented stuff, some other hobby stuff, but a lot of Dungeons and Dragons.
Ooh,
which
nice.
has been great. It's actually been super, super fun. But 40k is calling my name again. I figured I'd give some people a break and give people a chance to warm up a little bit.
Oh, how humble!
You know? Yeah, I know, right?
Oh yeah, we just ate that humble pie for dinner. Nice snack.
No, it's been a nice break, but I'm excited to jump back into things, especially right now with everything being so exciting.
Nice. We're gonna move on to hobby, and so you mentioned that's what you've been doing. So what kind of hobby? You've been painting D&D figures, or you've been getting any armies done, or Dan?
Yeah, I'm working on my upcoming CanHammer team tournament army, which is going to be null and void within a couple of weeks. But it's gonna be great and it's gonna look cool, so I'm happy about that. Yeah, that's the main thing I've been working on lately.
So why don't you spoil it? So what, Tyranids? Am I allowed to say that?
Tyranids. I'm playing the nasty 7 flyer mucoloid, shoot you in the face and then punch you in the face and then not let you do things list.
Oh, gross. Yep. So how do you feel about this whole nerf bat thing now that you're coming back? Like, does that scare you or?
I'm excited. I cannot wait until this FAQ drops. At this time, the date is currently April 11th. Our March FAQ is not out.
Nope.
And we are all desperately waiting to see how the meta shifts. But I'm super excited to see where it goes, especially considering the ETC is coming up, and it will more than likely be the last FAQ before we have to set in lists. So, yeah, I'm super looking forward to that.
Yeah, I was so disappointed it didn't come out pre-CanHammer team. Unbelievably disappointed, because I wanted zombies gone from the meta. Yeah. I just couldn't handle it anymore. So move on to you, Skari. What kind of hobby you been doing, man?
Well, I've been doing quite a few different appearances at some local tournaments. Went down to Hamilton and played Black Knight, and doing some tournaments up here locally with local game stores after doing the Bash, and really just kind of driving the community with some small campaigns. You know, we got one running right now where it's 16 players or so, and we're playing in the old Vogan campaign map. Which was a GW campaign from back in the day. And so it was really cool. You know, we just started that this week. So doing that sort of thing, doing some content online, and then really just focusing on the Drukhari, like just as much as I can. Like that has absorbed me for the last 2.5 weeks or so.
Sick. So for me, I haven't been doing too much. Working on my Astra Militarum because Kieran decided that's what he wanted to play, and I'm the only one that owned a guard army. So I'm painting up some models for him because my army's actually done for CanHammer team, fully painted.
That's great. That's pretty lucky.
Yeah, it doesn't look like super amazing, but it's done. Tabletop, and I'm moving, so it is what it is, man. You can only do so much. So we're actually going to take a quick break to hear the advert from Martin over in the UK. And then we'll be right back, and we're going to jump right into Drukhari because I have a feeling this is going to go for a long time.
Hey guys, Martin here from wargamesuk.co.uk. Proud to sponsor their boys at CanHammer. Come check us out for some great discounts on all your hobby goodness and needs.
And we are back to talk about the Drukhari. So what do you guys think of that? You missed the name Dark Eldar? Or are we cool with Drukhari? Sound better?
This is the game where the points don't matter and everything's made up.
I don't know if that quite. Anyway? I was like, I don't know if that quite answered my question, but I'll give it to you.
Yeah,
I like it.
It's Drew Carey from Whose Line Is It Anyway, right? So that's why
the reference comes back all the way around.
Yes,
or Drew Skari. Drew Skari.
I have to leave. I'm gonna leave.
Codex Drew Skari.
Drew Skari. I love it.
Yeah.
That's gonna stick,
Drew Skari. I like that. That's a good idea.
Skari? Yeah.
They must have thought about that.
I love it.
That should be the new thing, man. Get that should be your new alias online. Screw this whole Skaredcast Skari thing. You're Drew Skari.
Welcome to Drukhari.
He was assassinated.
Really
assassinated and became a god, a self-proclaimed Drukhari god.
Kind of like Vect, But yeah, we start off with the new book. Like they've we're not going to go too much into the fluff, I don't think, there, Chris. But it's definitely advanced the timeline and really kind of brought the fluff up, or the fluff. I don't want to say fluff, but the lore up to speed with what's going on with the rest of the universe.
If you want to synopsis it, man, like what has been going on? Because the Dark Eldar, they went from being kind of like a standalone, like evil army to kind of just being more friendly with the rest of the Eldar.
Not really. They're still the jerks that you know and love in terms of the lore. They're completely hedonistic and do everything for their own gain. They don't really give a crap about anybody else. Not even their craft world or Exilite kin. They'll fight alongside them, if they need to, but like they're not exactly chummy with each other. But it really kind of touches on what's been happening since the Great Rift opened and how they're just using that to just total advantage on like raiding all the stuff on the dark side of the Imperium and just annihilating entire worlds that were normally well protected and not able to get raided, and they're just taking total advantage of the chaos of the universe at the moment. And then combine that with some updates to the fluff with Vect, spoilers ahead, of course, guys. So skip like 10 minutes ahead if you don't want to get this spoiled before you read it. But Vect is assassinated. All the pieces that were used to regrow him were also destroyed in one fell swoop. And then the Dark City kind of fell into anarchy. And then they put on a vigil for him. All the Archons, enemies, friends, everybody was in honor of Vect. And during that ceremony, he kind of resurrected and killed everybody essentially, and then declares himself a Dark Muse, one of the muses, essentially a living Dark Muse.
Is there other muses, or is he the only muse, or how does that work?
Well, historically, the muses are godlike inspirations for the Drukhari, in lore. and the fact that he's kind of created himself as like an icon, like he can never die. Essentially, it's pretty cool. It also gives GW the excuse not to give him a model. You know, he's too cool for school and will never go on a real space raid ever again. You know, and I can see how they did that for like ease reasons.
Which is weird because... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Sorry. You're probably sitting in a chair somewhere, you know, all wired up.
Then, people. Yeah, they also had, you know, like there's been accounts of the Drukhari kind of creating like surrogates of the Imperial like golden throne and stuff like that. Like wow. Trying to recreate it and shit. It's pretty cool. They've got like some cool little. So if you're a lore guy, you know, it's definitely worth a read. They've changed a few things. They've expanded on some other things, and you know, even on how like the 3 different factions in the book sort of wage war. You know, like they go into detail about how it's not very common, for example, for a full witch cult army to go to real space on a raid by itself. Like, it's very uncommon for just witches to go out and fight without, like, Kabbalite or Coven support. But that when they do, they usually sell tickets. And what they'll have is they'll have a couple of, like, spaceship pleasure cruisers, like, just floating, like, right above the battlefield with all the spectators. And they'll be serving drinks and having a good time watching all the witches like cut stuff up, and the tickets usually create like internal strife and people like murdering each other for tickets on these like pleasure cruisers things. It's actually really hilarious. Just shows you how like arrogant and like above natural law the Dark Eldar really are, and they just don't give 2 flying fidues about anything.
It's terrifying. So, that's terrifying. Just being like, you're on this like Imperial planet and this like pleasure cruise like shows up and they're projecting like some kind of weird Dark Eldar like screen with like an announcer announcing that they're coming, and then you're just like watching these screaming witches running down a field and you're like, Jesus, oh man, why am I here?
Yeah, and it's really cool because they say how in some of the planets the Drukhari have been like, they've been raiding these planets over and over for millennia, right? So a lot of these planets, what they'll do is they'll go in, they'll raid, and they'll leave, right? And you know, because they've been gone, they'll only come back every so many thousand years. So their raids become part of like the folklore and legends of like certain like civilizations and like different human worlds. You know, like because they're just like demons that come in the night and steal their babies and stuff. It's like intense. And to the Drukhari, it's just, oh yeah, we're just going to wait for a little bit until like they rebuild and regrow, and then we'll just go and like farm them a little bit more, you know? So
it's kind of weird. That's kind of twisted, especially because,
yeah,
you know, they're moving in a direction, like society, I guess, is kind of moving in this direction where that's maybe not okay, but you know, the lore is pretty twisted.
Oh yeah.
So we'll move on. So the Dark Eldari or Eldari, their list, there's as Ridvan mentioned, there's 3 kind of keyworded factions. There's Kabbalites or Cabal, there's Witch Cults, and then there's Homunculus Covens. So that's kind of like the 3 different styles of Dark Eldar. So they have different rules that affect all these different units, right?
Correct.
So what's kind of the army-wide special rules?
I'll let you go with this one, Dan.
There are quite a few. First up, I would say the poison weapons.
Yeah.
That's a big one. So how that one works is that any weapon with that rule automatically wounds on the 4+ unless targeting a vehicle or a Titanic unit.
Ooh,
pretty useful.
Yeah, it's wildly powerful. It is sadly sometimes a weakness.
Yes, against small, like low toughness 3 or so. Yeah.
But I don't imagine a balanced force is going to have too much trouble with a lot of horde stuff.
No, we'll get to that for sure.
Yeah. The next big one is Power from Pain, and this is one of the iconic ones for Dark Eldar. One of the coolest, or Drukhari. One of the coolest rules, I think, of the whole idea of Drukhari. As they go throughout the game, they actually gain rules. So turn 1, you get a rule, turn 2, et cetera, and they all are compounded on top of each other.
Yeah, this is definitely the thing that I think adds the most flavor to the Codex, and it affects almost everything in the book, even the stuff that's faction specific within the book, like Incubi or Scourge and things like that as well.
So it's cool that it ends at turn 5 as well. I thought it'd be neater if it went on to like turn 7. That way, if the game, because this is I'm off topic a bit here, but it goes on to turn 5. If it went on to turn 7. Then, because a lot of Dark Eldar armies historically have really struggled with the longer game turns because they're more fragile, and they tend to just get tabled. I don't know if you agree with that, Ridvan.
Not anymore.
Not anymore, so maybe that's why. Oh, that big guns firing there, bud. Or big shots fired. And then, so I thought that would have been cool if they got like some crazy buffs like turn 7 and just like hosed you. But we'll quickly run through that. So turn 1, you roll a d6 each time a model with this bonus loses a wound. On a 6, they do not lose that wound, so it's like a feel no pain. Eager to flay, you can re-roll the die when determining a unit with this bonus moves and advances or charges. That's turn 2 and onward. So it makes me want to say, if you're going to make a long bomb charge, make sure it's turn 2 or onward. Turn 3, you get add 1 to all hit rolls for units in the fight phase. Pretty good against a lot of things that are -1 to hit.
Incredibly good. It basically turns the entire Dark Eldar army into hitting on 2s in combat. It's crazy good.
Yeah, and actually there isn't a lot of -1 to hits in combat anymore now that the Changeling's gone. It's basically like Zangor if they're what's that spell called? Glamored, and then I can't think of too many other things actually. Round 4, units automatically pass morale checks. That's really nice.
It's really good. Like, turn 3 really if you're Black Heart, which we'll get to.
And then turn 5.
-1 leadership.
Yeah, for all enemy units within 6. That's pretty solid. It's basically a free rule, affects everything. I like it a lot. So what do the next one is combat drugs, Dan. What do those do?
Combat drugs. These are a very common thing that we've seen in the past as well. How this functions now, though, is slightly differently. What you can do now is you can pick a combat drug, an individual combat drug for every single unit if you want to, or you can roll. The only thing that if you pick, you can't duplicate until you've taken them all at least once. So the first one is Adrenalite, probably, +1 attack. Grave Lotus, +1 strength. Hypex, +2 to move. Painbringer, +1 to toughness. Serpentin, +1 to weapon skill. And Splinter Mind, +2 leadership.
That's really handy. And the fact that you get to choose
it's really
them.
good.
So which one do you choose turn 1, generally, if you know that you...
Well, it's per
unit.
for the whole game.
Oh, per
so
unit, but you have to use
unit
it through...
the whole game,
You just get it, yeah.
Okay, wow, I completely misread that. So you just pick it for the whole game.
Yeah, and it's usually just depends on what role you want the unit. Now these combat drugs are almost exclusive. They're exclusive to the witch cult units. So things like witches, beast pack masters, Helions, Reaver jet bikes. So it really depends on, you can pick them from game to game, which is pretty cool. So, being able to build or to adapt your list based on matchup and opponents actually comes really in handy as the games progress.
Yeah, I feel that. And it might be handy if you have your, anything that's fast moving, add +2 further movement, you could get in somebody's grill pretty quickly.
Yeah, there's even a couple of ways to to modify these, like a stratagem that'll affect them, as well as even a warlord trait that or a relic, as well, that can help you really make a killy witch cult character that's topped up on drugs.
Right on.
Topped up.
Hopped up on them there drugs there, kids. Don't do them drugs. So we're going to move on to the Archon. He's the first of the HQ choices. Now, I believe he stayed pretty similar to the Index. So we're not going to go through everything in super detail. We'll maybe I'm going to pose the question to either Dan or Skari or both. what kind of a role and what kind of a function he has in the army, as opposed to what he specifically does. So we'll start with that. When would you take an Archon, and what kind of role does he have within the army? Ridvin?
I would take an Archon every time. Because the role is now a lot more versatile than it used to be. The Archon gained a lot from the Index version, and simply put, giving them a reroll ones to hit aura. Now, it's important to note it is both in shooting and in combat reroll ones, which affects Cabalite units. And this is any Cabalite unit, so things like Ravagers, and Cabalite warriors mainly.
Okay. And so you would always take one just for that ability alone, unless you're doing something specifically like a witch cult, in which case you'd pass, or would you still take them?
No, I'd make sure that I had at least one Archon to fill out a Cabal. Now, we'll get to the obsessions and whatnot after, but you're pretty much always going to have at least one of these guys in your army if you want a hard-hitting Dark Eldar list. Okay. Not only that, but they do come equipped with a Shadow Field, which is a 2+ invulnerable save until they fail it once. And with an addition of a few relics, you can really kind of adapt the Archon to whatever it is you need him to do, whether it's a supporty character or a anti-psyker thing with a couple of relics as well, or even a close combat machine with a Digian Blade and like a relic, for example.
Cool. So we'll move on to Drazar Dan. Would you ever take this guy? He's an HQ, special character.
There is probably one situation that you could probably bring him that he would be worth the extra points, and that's if you're running a bunch of Incubi.
Just because he gives them +1 to hit.
The +1 to hit is actually fantastic for Incubi. Like, they're really great with a +1 to hit, especially considering you then go up to a 1+ on turn 3, which is amazing. But I just don't think that he is quite matched up. He's tough. He's fast. So I think he has the same. I think it's nearly the same as before. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ruben, but I think
he got cheaper. He's pretty much the same. They just changed the rule now where if he charges, he essentially gets to attack twice.
Right, which is exceptionally better.
Yeah,
that is a big deal for sure. A double activation alone can be game changing, right?
Yeah, because he's no slouch in combat. He's got his dual blades and his single blades, and
he's killing.
He's infantry killing. That's for sure.
Yeah, he's killing.
So, silly question: why aren't Incubi? So why aren't they Cabalite or Cabal? Yeah, I don't know how to say it. Cabal. Why don't they have the Cabal?
Because they're used as hired mercenaries, as bodyguards. So they're not really part of any Cabalite structure. It's witch cults use them as bodyguards. Coven units use them. They're not technically a Cabalite force.
Awesome. Okay, cool.
So it's like it's a lore thing.
Yeah, I was just wanting people to hear that because I found that pretty interesting. Because I always kind of assumed they were more towards an Archon Cabal style list, but it's cool that they aren't. So Lilith, Ridvin, is she worth taking anymore?
Well, she has her place. She's quite cheap. She's less than 100 points, and she can do some work. Now, if you are taking a cult of a cult of what's her face,
Strife.
Cult of Strife, then yes, I would pretty much put her in as a guarantee, but I find that it will really be dependent on what cult you are using, and since she's not Red Grief, I feel that you won't be seeing her as often as she would probably deserve to be seen.
Okay, and the cults, which are kind of like chapters for Space Marines or legions, or not legions, regiments for Astra Militarum, it kind of gives them special abilities and special builds. And so you're saying she's just from a weaker cult, which kind of makes her unfortunate, not necessarily.
Well, it's not necessarily weaker. It's just with the current meta right now, I feel like they're called obsessions. So the obsession that she's a part of, which is just +1 attack when they charge or get charged, I feel like it's good, but it's situational, and there are obsessions in the book that are better at the moment with the way the game is being played.
Okay, and then a succubus is more of a generic witch character. So I'm assuming in certain obsessions you would take a succubus over her just to get the more customization.
Correct. Succubuses are fantastic. And we'll get into some of the rules, but I love having at least one succubus in my list. You can get her up to a 3+ invulnerable save, give her some cool relics, and then now they have access to the witch weaponry, which make them even better at a supporting character role.
So let's just get into that then. What do the witch weapons give her?
Well, there's 3 witch weapons. She comes with an Archite Glaive and an Agonizer. An Archite Glaive is essentially a -3 AP, +2 strength, essentially power sword that has -1 to hit. So it's not like it's pretty good at just dealing with regular infantry. There's a relic that one of the obsessions can take that makes it essentially a power fist with no -1 to hit, which can be rather powerful.
Okay.
On a character. Now, where the succubus excels, though, I find is in a supporting role with her no escape rule. So witches have a rule where they can hold and tie up infantry in combat. So they force a roll-off between the witch player and the opposing player. And the only time you can fall back from a unit of witches is if you win the roll-off.
So good.
It is incredibly good. Now, it only works against infantry, but a succubus fills a specific role as an HQ where you're usually going to see them a lot in an outrider detachment with either Reaver jet bikes or Scourge as well. But because you can take the witch cult weapons, the razor flails add D3 attacks. So she goes from 4 attacks to, 4 plus D3, which is great. The Hydra gauntlets give her an extra attack and reroll wounds in combat with a -1 AP. So it's pretty generic weapon option if you just want to cause some wounds on the enemy. But she can also be equipped with a shard net and impaler. Now, the shard net and impaler makes your opponent roll a D3 versus your D6 when rolling for that fallback.
Oh my god, so good.
It's incredibly good. So as a support character, running next to your Archon or your Grotesques or your Reaver jet bikes even, if you can get her into the same combat against a unit of infantry, that 155-point model with a shard net and impaler can prevent an entire unit of infantry from falling back, allowing your very killy units that are very vulnerable to shooting not get shot. And I think that alone just makes her versatility incredible. And with the ability to take 3 warlord traits in the list, which we'll get to, in a bit, but being able to make her a warlord to take a warlord trait giving her +1 invulnerable save, she's now totting around a 3+ invulnerable save with 5 wounds, with a 6+ feel no pain, with 5 attacks at strength. Chardonnet's is damage too, by the way, and then can stop things from falling back. And for 55 points, you cannot go wrong with something as tough as that.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth when I was going to say she comes, even stock, without adding in any bonuses or warlord traits. A 4+ invulnerable save with 5 wounds is essentially 10 wounds to kill her. That's, if you tie down most of a unit and you kind of tag her on the end, she's not going to die, and you're holding them in place no matter what. And I love that, because normally what you have to do is you have to, surround models to lock them in combat, but with her, you don't need to be as tricksy, and if your opponent, let's say, plays better and has them so that you can't lock a model down, you can still just do it with the rules, which is fantastic.
And a lot of people will kind of say, well, she's on foot and she won't be able to keep up with, say, Reaver jet bikes. And, let me tell you, she will keep up. Being able to, she moves 8 inches. being able to give her combat drugs for 2 inches to her movement, for example, that's 10 inches. And then she has the ability to advance and charge with, say, the red grief obsession. And now she's essentially moving anywhere from 11 to 17 inches by herself with a re-rollable charge from turn 1.
That's money, man. That's a money character right there. So we're going to move on. We're going to move on to the basically homuncules or homunculus. I can't pronounce any of this stuff.
Homunculi?
Homunculi. I don't know, man. Dan, you know I'm ridiculous with this stuff.
That's true.
So we're going to go on to Dan. What does Urian do, and what kind of role does he have in the army?
Urian is actually one of the head of all of the homunculi, right? Where they're one of the biggest cults, the prophets of flesh. So this is one of the tied-in characters to a specific obsession.
Correct.
Where this is, he's quite interesting, and he tends to be a little bit tougher than the rest of them. So first off, he has the Cask of Cleansing, which is a unique weapon to him. It's a once per game ability, 12-inch range, 2d6 shots, strength 3, and AP 2. So nothing crazy, but it's cool. It'll be fun when you surprise that with somebody. And then an Ichor Injector, once per game. Yeah. The Ichor Injector is also cool, but it's one of the standard weapons for all homunculi, I believe. So we'll go through it. The bear can only make a single attack, so it's like an extra attack. You can re-roll failed wound rolls, and if you roll a 6 to wound, you do D3 mortal wounds in addition to any other damage.
Yeah, if it goes off, yeah.
Yeah, if you get lucky, that's a like I said, it's a good surprise for just a random little character. He's also toughness and wounds 5, so pretty durable.
So toughness 6 with his aura.
Yeah, with his own aura. So yeah, speaking of that, he's got the Sculptor Torments. No, that's the Master of Pain. Right. So the Master of Pain ability, which is pretty amazing. You add 1 to toughness characteristics, Prophets of Flesh units while within 6 inches of this guy.
This is something that all homunculus have, and it is important to note that it also affects vehicles.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Right on.
Yeah, because it just says models, and so the Taloses can be Prophets of Flesh, right?
Taloses, Venoms, if you use Forge World, the Reaper, or even a Tantalus.
They gain the.
They have Coven, yes, so you can make them Prophets of Flesh.
Really? I did not realize they had Coven. That's wild.
Yeah, the only one that can't is the Ravager. The Ravager can't, and the Razorwing Jetfikes cannot, but Raiders can, and Venoms can.
Ooh. Neat. That's pretty fantastic. So he's got a 4+ invul, and then one cool thing is that all damage suffered by Urian is halved.
Yeah, he's gonna live.
Yeah, and there's ways to have him regain wounds, and yeah, he's a durable dude. You also add +1 strength and leadership characteristics to the same units within 6 inches of him.
That's wild.
Yeah, a big circle aura of extra durability, extra offense, and the guy is going to be pretty difficult to actually put down.
Best part is he's only 15 more points than a regular homunculus.
Yeah, I'd say anyone that's going to be running Prophets of Flesh will guarantee be running this guy. He's probably a reason to pick Prophets of Flesh.
And the best part about him is that GW historically has been using all of the auras to generally be rerolls, and the fact that it's like a stat buff is both different and awesome at the same time.
That's true. It's a very good point. Yeah, it's pretty great. I think if I remember correctly, is Prophets of Flesh the one that gets +1 invul too?
Oh yes, baby.
Oh my god! So he has a 3+ invul.
Yes.
Well, it's actually it gives +1 to the save of Insensible to Pain. His invulnerable self is a clone field, not the Insensible from Pain. So it wouldn't affect him. It means he does still have a 4+. And then one ability that we forgot is he does mortal wounds to all units within 3 inches in the fight phase. At the start of the fight phase. Yeah.
Oh, on a 6. They
yeah. So it's nothing crazy. It's just a great way to pick away at things if you need to,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's pretty impressive. And then we have the regular homunculi. I don't know. I'm sick.
Homunculus.
And these ones do have the Insensible to Pain rule, so they have a 5+ invulnerable save, which if they are Prophets of Flesh, it goes up to a 4+. And then these guys only add 1 to the toughness, they don't also add +1 to the strength.
And leadership, yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of not... They're not as good, as Ridvan had mentioned. You would always take a Urian if you're taking Prophets of Flesh. If you're not, you just want to maybe have a unit of Talos that's a different kind of choice, then you would just maybe take one of these to buff their toughness so they don't die as easily.
The Homunculus does have access to a variety of different weapons, though, that Urian doesn't. So, you can make them a lot more versatile in-game than Urian Rakath himself. Homunculus can have a poison weapon that does 2 damage, for example. They can have, like, sniper rifles. They can have venom blades, which wound units on 2s. So they're definitely more of a toolkit character.
Totally dig them. So we'll move on to the troop choices within this book. We've only really been given 3 options, 1 for each of the, I guess, styles of Dark Eldar, for the lack of a better term. So we'll start with the first one. Why am I so struggling with this? Kabbalite warriors.
There's too many vowels.
Jeez.
It's understandable.
Jeez. So these guys are like the standard infantry units in the game. When do you generally use them in your list, Ridvan?
All the time. These guys are incredible. They are 6 points apiece.
Cheap.
They're dirt cheap. They come with a 5-up armor save standard, a 6+ feel no pain because of the power from pain. They have access to a plethora of various weapon options. You're using at least 3 squads of these in a Cabal battalion. Like, if you're not taking Kabbalite warriors, you're missing out on just how, good they are.
Cool.
And they've got options for all the weapons. They've got poison, that kind of base poison amount that you always want in a Dark Eldar force.
Yeah, you can run them in small elite units of 5 men, like in a transport, or you can have a special weapon for every 5 men. So you can even run them up to units of 20 and run 4 blasters in them, which are like long-range melter guns. You can run them, in units of 10 and put a heavy weapon in there as well. So, one of my favorite builds right now is they're versatile. So you can build them anti-tank, anti-infantry, support like in the backfield, or you can run them up as like a chaff screen. They're just an all-round great unit.
Yeah, and they also are cheap enough that you can use them to farm command points.
Yeah.
3 of these guys in a patrol, or not a patrol, a battalion. It's great.
Well, if you're Dark Eldar, they could be in a patrol.
That's
Just
right.
saying.
Yeah, they could be. Because we'll get to that.
Yes, we will.
So you've been actually playtesting the next troop unit a lot, right, Ridvan? Witches?
I've been using witches since the index, but yes, I do usually use 1 or 2 units of them.
And so did they get a buff, or we kind of talked about them earlier, but is there anything else you want to touch on them?
So they keep a lot of the rules. They have a full plus invulnerable save in combat, which is great. They gained in this codex a 6-up invulnerable save in shooting as well. Mm-hmm. So they have a 6-up invul save all the time, which is, like, as a long-standing Dark Eldar player, that is incredible. Because usually they just stand in the open and die, and now they don't just die. There's a chance that one of them might live,
Well, you get a 6-up and a 6-up,
Yeah, you get 2
now we're
6-ups.
talking.
Yeah, it's good. Like, it comes in handy, and they got cheaper as well. They went from 9 points to 8 points. They have a pistol. They've got plasma grenades, which can be shot as well, and they've got access to all the cool weapon options that the witches have. So they can have extra attacks, they can, with obsessions, advance and charge, or they can be pretty much immune to morale, because you can run them in blocks of 20 and have like a conscript-like ability to stick around. It's just they're also great. They're a great cheap choice too.
And how many points per model are they again?
They are 8 points a model.
Yeah, that's not brutally expensive. That's pretty decent for something with an invulnerable save in combat.
Mm-hmm. And a pistol, and the combat drugs, and the power from pain ability, so they're hitting on 2s after turn 3, and 3 attacks a model in combat.
Yeah, they gained an attack too, right?
Yeah,
or was that?
They gained an attack too, so they essentially became blood brides, which were the blood brides. for 3 points less or something than a Blood Bride was.
Pretty good. I
Yeah.
do love the move 8. Move 8 is just fantastic for any
So
kind of
good.
anything at all, really. But move 8 on just an infantry model, just running at you, so good.
Yeah, that's one of the best parts about this edition is having a movement characteristic that can be varied. Just allows them to, not be 6. They can go 8, etc., which is pretty awesome. And this is a very fast book. Like, I think some of the slowest stuff in it is like 7-inch move. So, and so Dan, go ahead.
Sorry, I will say that no escape working on fly units as well. Probably one of the coolest things you can do. No escape is probably the best rule you can use in this game.
Yeah.
Like in this codex. I think it's probably my favorite one.
Well, exactly, right? Like most people with fly units, they're not scared of being tied down, but now you got them. It's great. I can't even believe they put that in, to be honest.
Yeah, now it is only infantry. There are some fly units that are not infantry, like crisis suits, for example.
But no one likes town.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody.
So, but it is very, very powerful.
Cool, so that brings us on to the third troop choice. Dan, you want to take the racks away?
I could definitely try. So we've got movement of 7, so slightly slower than the other ones. They are tough 4 though, which is nice.
Yeah.
They do come with the 5+ invul, and of course the 6-up feel no pain from pain. They are fairly, I don't know. These are probably the most standard troops of the Dark Eldar. They don't have a specific like I'm going to attack you or I'm going to shoot you. They can kind of do both.
They don't really have any shooting capability.
Yeah, they are just combat. Now they are poisoned in combat, so that's pretty great. You could run into somebody and anybody tough, you can tear them down in combat.
Can you explain what you just said? They don't have any shooting capability because they do have guns.
Only 1 in 5 can take a gun.
Yeah, okay, but they do shoot. They're just not super effective at it.
Their one gun, the Os Factor, actually got a decent boost. A poisoned weapon, single shot, so but -3 AP, 1 damage. But you add 2 to wound rolls for this weapon, so it's a 2+ poison weapon. And if you kill something, the model's unit immediately suffers another mortal wound on a D6 of a 4+.
It's not terrible.
So you playing somebody off, you might get lucky and kill another one. You're not going to take 40 of these things, but they are pretty solid. It could be potential. It has potential.
Yeah, they have their own. Like you can't. That you can get them to shoot. The Ossifact is probably the best choice, and it's cool to note that you can give the squad leader like different weapon options as well.
Cool. So as we move away from the troops, what's the real winner? My pick is the witches. I think they are the ultimate winner in this troop section.
I like Cabalites, to be honest.
I would actually probably agree with Cabalites. I think they're going to be your versatile. They're your attack squad. They're your that can do everything. I think the witches are probably the most improved.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
100%.
And I think that it's going to be interesting. I think my favorite idea build is like 120 of these and just running at people.
Mm-hmm.
So that
sounds so cool.
That sounds amazing. And then like with that many invulnerable saves and with the combat drugs, those guys are going to be scary. And they're going to close the gap fast. Moving 8, that's turn 2, turn 3, they're in you for sure, right?
And then turn 2, you're rerolling charges and like you are there.
Yeah.
Well, the obsessions is where that build gets crazy because you can make them Cult of the Cursed Blade, which gives them more +1 strength standard, so they become strength 4 with 3 attacks apiece in combat, and they can only ever lose 1 model for morale, which means you can run, if you're running 100 to 120 of them, that's 5 to 6 units of 20 that are all toughness, there's strength 4 standard, 3 attacks apiece, and they're not going to run away if you shoot like 18 of them off. You're still going to have 1 girl left with an agonizer or something. And then with some combat drug manipulation, which we'll get to when we go through relics and whatnot, you could actually give 1 or 2 of the units +1 toughness or extra movement, and all of a sudden you got some very, very scary board control troop unit that can actually tie you up and kill things. All in all, it's just there's a lot of good stuff that can be done if you have a creative mind.
I think you definitely hit the nail on the head with as far as this whole codex really goes. Is the stacking or combinations of rules that you can do is going to make this a book that is finesse to the extreme, but it's going to demolish people who aren't ready.
Yes, I agree. We're going to have people who are picking up the new codex and going out and playing, 10 games with them and getting smashed every single game and kind of not understanding why. It's because this is not a codex that is like point and click by any stretch of the imagination. It's very strong, but it's still only toughness 3 models, and there are still only elves, So you still have to
picking up buckets of models.
Yeah. You're gonna lose a lot of models. You'll do a lot of damage, but you have to play smart. This is not a very tough army for any stretch of the imagination.
Cool. So we're going to move on to elites. There's this group of 4 units that we'll get into a little bit, and they're basically the court of the Archon. And so each one of them has kind of a special ability that they add to the court. But the one thing that I find really weird about them is they're all individual models, and none of them are characters. What do you guys think of that? And they don't take up slots. So if you take an Archon, any of the court of the Archon models, they don't take up elite slots, which could be good and bad if you're trying to fill a battalion or something, right? But maybe not a battalion. What's the other one? The brigade. What do you think of that, having these solo kind of characters?
I'm genuinely confused. I don't understand what the reason was.
Yeah, I just don't get it. I'm like, they're just going to die. They're toughness 3 wounds, some of them, and some of them are, they're generally 3 wounds apiece, toughness 5, toughness 3. But it's like, Ridvan, what role do they have in the book? Or is it just kind of an oversight? They wanted to keep these models in, but they didn't have a use for them? Or?
Well, in the index, they were characters. So in the index, they had the character keyword. They did lose that in the codex.
So what does that mean for the Dark Eldar? Does that mean that it's an oversight, or they're garbage? Or
I believe that because of the beta rules, what they've done is they've put a unit together that is single models that's very easy to hide, that will protect your characters from shooting. A Lamian, for example, is only 15 points. It's 15 points for a 3-wound model with a wound on 2+ mortal wounds blade. So they have I feel that they're definitely more of a thematic choice than a choice that you'll be seeing in competitive builds. But they still have a place, not as useful as they were by any stretch of the imagination. Personally, they're probably going to be sitting on my shelf, sadly. There's so much good stuff in this book that so just won't cut it, because there's so many things competing for points and for a place in lists, and I feel that they're just going to lose out on the cut. If they would have been a choice in a slot, if they would have taken up a slot to help fill a brigade, then you would definitely see these models. But sadly, they seem to have kind of cut down. They don't want it to be easy for a Dark Eldar to just take a brigade with 15-point, elites, for example.
But you could do that if you didn't take an Archon.
In matched play, you can only take a court if you have an Archon.
Okay, so you're basically screwed. Okay.
Yes.
So they basically ruined them, in my opinion.
Yes, they're definitely not what they were. They were not bad before, but now they're just terrible.
So we'll skip over them then. There's the 4 units. It starts off with the Lamian, then they have the Medusae, then they have the Slith, and then they have the Ghoul. And nobody's going to see them. So we'll hand them off to the world's favorite bodyguards, the Incubi. Are they winners, Ridvan?
Incubi do a lot of damage, but sadly, against anybody worth their salt, they will not last very long. They will hit like a freight train. But as we were talking earlier, you have to keep them supported. Incubi kill things so well that they will either kill things and stay outside of combat after murdering their target and then get shot to pieces, being only toughness 3, or your opponent will simply fall back from them and then shoot the hell out of you, and they die anyway. So in order to use Incubi, you'd have to really kind of plan it. It's not like grotesques that are a lot tougher and can survive some shooting. You'd have to tag them with a succubus or witches and then use them as like a mop-up unit or as smaller units to hold your backfield.
Backfield defense does have potential for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to move on. I'm going to take the next unit because they're like my favorite thing in the entire book.
I can't believe you're taking this away from Ridvin right now.
Okay, fine, Ridvin, you can have
No, it's okay. You can go ahead and I've just been using them since 7th edition, man.
I have
Like,
30
okay.
of the 3rd edition ones, bro.
Yeah,
Do you know how ugly
that's
those
great.
models were?
Oh, I know. I've been playing Dark Eldar for like 15 years.
Yeah, so I played them in 3rd edition, and in 3rd edition, you used to put like 3 individual models on the board, and then they would kind of advance up the board. You couldn't target them, and you could bring the unit on at one of those locations. And
so good. It was so good.
especially if you ran 3 units of them, because that's 30 dudes in your grill. Like you couldn't run back then, so it was usually like turn 3 or 4 they'd come in. But yeah. Oh man, I feel bad, but yeah. So the mandrakes are awesome. They move 8. They got standard Dark Eldar stats, but they are strength 4 in close combat, which is pretty huge. Each one of them has a Bale Blast. Basically, what it is 18-inch range, assault 2, strength 4, -1 AP, and every time you roll a wound of a 6, they suffer a mortal wound in addition to any other damage. So they're awesome.
They're really, really good now. They went down in... What, sorry?
Hitting on 3s too, which is great.
Yeah.
Well, that, and then on turn 3, they're hitting on 2s in combat, right? And they have 3 attacks a model in combat, and from Index to Codex, they gained +1 AP on their close combat attacks. They have a 5+ invulnerable save, and they deep strike innately. It is a fantastic model.
You just took
Combine that... What, sorry?
You just took it from me. You just took it all.
Oh, I'm sorry, man. I got passionate all of a sudden. But you can continue. You can continue.
No, I'm just kidding. It's great. They're amazing because they're -1 to hit, and 5+ invul, which is huge. But I'm shocked. Their shooting is amazing.
It's incredible.
Like 10 of these dudes dropping in 9 away. That's 20 shots hitting on 3s, strength 4, mortal wounds. That's devastating. Oh, and they're not that expensive. These guys are a real winner.
Yeah, and the point decrease, as well as the added AP for their close combat attacks, means that they will go in and they will like wreck some face. They might not be able to kill like some of the tougher targets out there, but those mortal wounds, like I had a battle report recently and I played against a Mortarion list, and they were just picking wounds off some really tough characters and models with those mortal wounds. And it just adds up over the course of a game.
Oh yeah, that's the biggest thing. They just go through. You're like, oh, I don't care if you make all your saves. You're just going to take 1 or 2 mortal wounds. That's good enough.
Now, if you're really being cheeky, you can always combine it with something like Doom.
I suppose, yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah, and then it just gets nasty. But back to the Dark Eldar.
Well, that's a real point that you just made. Is that these guys are Eldari. They do benefit from a lot of those shared abilities and spells, right? And Doom is the big one. That's a big difference, right? Especially with a lot of the low strength and some of the poison. Like, you're going to be doing a ton of wounds on some pretty high toughness stuff with this army.
Yeah, but realistically, that's not what you're going to see these on the field with, right? You're not going to see these in units of 10. You're going to see them in units of 5 to deep strike and screen and annoy, right?
Yeah, they drop in front of the enemy. They do some damage. They slow them down. Yep, they could threaten the backfield. One thing that I like about having... I've never played with Mandrakes, obviously, in this edition, but having a unit that innately drops in just dictates how your opponent can deploy. He's got to be careful in his backfield. Like, if you don't have anything that deep strikes, for lack of a better term, he basically can push all of his stuff maybe more forward and engage you. Whereas just having the threat of like 2 or 3 units of 5 of these is enough to make your opponent play more cautiously and spread out, and then you can maybe take them out.
Now, something that's very important to note is that Incubi and Mandrakes do not conflict with obsessions in detachments. Even though they are not specifically Cabal, Coven, or Cult, they will not take away from an obsession. So they are the ones that you're going to be using to fill out those brigade slots and, those elite slots and things that, if you want to add in a unit that's versatile that will fit into any list, a coven list, a homunculus list, a cult list, or a cabal list.
Cool. So we'll move on to Beastmaster. Have they changed it all from the index?
Yes.
In what way?
So they went down in points a little bit. And they went down in effectiveness, really. They, instead of re-rolling all misses for beast units within 6, they now only re-roll 1s in combat. And now, in order to take beasts, you have to take at least 1 beast unit for each Beastmaster. So if you were to try and take 3 Beastmasters to fill out the elite slots in a brigade, you'd have to take 3 beast units.
Good, I like
and
that.
if you take beast masters, then, which you can only take beasts if you take beast masters, beasts don't take a slot either. So they also kind of stopped the brigade shenanigans with like 20-point beast units as well.
It's unfortunate. So grotesque, Stan, these guys worth it?
These guys are stars. I think these are one of the ones that people are going to be pretty interested in. Move 7, hitting on 3s in combat, strength 5, tough 5, 4 wounds each, 4 attacks. They have the 5+ invul that all the Coven have, as well as power from pain. They come with fairly normal weapons, I guess. They are -2 AP in close combat, right?
Yeah, well, the cleaver it's -2, which is great, but the flesh gauntlet is the biggest change from the index. And I think it really makes them a very versatile close combat unit.
Right. This is like a pseudo kind of power fist, right?
Well, no, it's they basically every time you roll a 6 to wound, it causes a mortal wound.
Oh, okay.
In addition to the damage, which means that. But before in the index, they always wounded on a 4+. They were poison, which meant they were really useless against small targets like toughness 4 or 5, because they always wound on 4s. And now they took that away, so it's strength user, which means they will be wounding like not tough things on better rolls and still getting the mortal wounds off as well.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I kind of like the cleaver just because you get the extra attack and -2 to save.
I do like the -2 as well, but in theory, that's semi-mitigated by the mortal wound dishing out.
Somewhat, yeah.
But not the same. I mean, you can have both, right? So.
Yeah, you do 4 attacks with the flesh gauntlets, and then add an attack for the monstrous cleaver. So you've got 5 attacks per guy essentially.
I like that. So moving.
Yeah. So. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I think they're just going to be great. I think they're, if I remember correctly, I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, but they're 32 points each, I think.
Yeah, they're very inexpensive. It's like 105 for a unit. Now, another big thing is they went from 3 wounds in the index to 4.
Yeah,
and
4 wounds is a big deal.
That alone is a big deal for grotesques.
Mm-hmm. That makes them ideal for tanking shots from D6 strength weapons, or taking shots from like strength damage 3 weapons. You're looking at a heavy increase in survivability.
I would agree.
So we'll move on to the beasts. We covered the Beastmaster a little bit earlier. There's 3 kinds. We have the Clawed Fiends, the Chimera, and the Razorwing Phlox, which dominated about a year ago and then got nerfed into the ground. Is there anything in the 3 Beast Models worth taking, or are they kind of nerfed and different, or...
They're pretty much exactly the same as the index. I've used all 3. The biggest change was the Razorwing Flock, and I feel like you will not see them too much in matched tournament play, but for narrative gaming, they're fantastic, and I highly recommend having a unit of each one. They each fit a different role. So Clawed Fiends are great with their 2 damage weapons. They can go up and like tear Primaris Marines apart, or pretty good against tanks. Chimera are they have weapon skill 3, and they have 3 attacks each. And they're only 10 points apiece. So you can have a unit of up to 12 doing 3 attacks each. That's 36 attacks, hitting on 3s, rolling 1s with a Beastmaster, and their strength 4. So they do volume of attacks against screens. So they're great for that. And then Razorwing Flocks are the one that everybody was crazy about back in the Index when the game was first released. They got a point increase, which still made them good, but not an auto take. Now they've gone down in points. They hit better in combat. They gained an AP, so they're AP 1, and they only have 4 attacks instead of 8. So they still fill a very similar role. They're just a little different now, not as efficient as they were before.
Yeah, more of a maybe smite or damage absorber, less of an actual combat unit. With 8 attacks and the rerolls from the Beastmaster, they were able to just go in and chew through stuff. Whereas now it's a little bit easier to tolerate. I kind of like that they changed the stats on them. They didn't just solely rely on points changes. Because now they seem fair, and they are cheaper, as you said. So you can still kind of run them to block, but... Because they do move 12, which is crazy and fly. So that's
and they
they're
fly,
good screening. So if you don't want to drop in anything turn 1, you can pop them up to slow down your enemy and to maybe protect some board space. But other than that, yeah, it's a shame that a lot of people bought a lot of them, and now they won't need more than 1 or 2 units.
If you play in a meta that has a lot of, say, smites or things like that, or mortal wound dealing, the Beastmaster does give his leadership to the Razorwing Flocks. So you always and he has combat drugs, which means you can make a Beastmaster +2 leadership and make your Beast's leadership 9, which then allows the Razorwing Flocks to stick around. So a big block of 9 or 12 Razorwing Flocks, that's about 40 wounds, 40 to 48 wounds. And even though they're only toughness 2 and have no save, like the enemy has to shoot a lot into them to get rid of every single one. And they're great for just putting out in the front of your army and just soaking up that first charge from those the Alpha Legion berserkers, or just soaking up that first rapid fire from a bunch of cultists. Or they're good to just be in the way, and they're now they're 2 points each less, so you're saving 40 points on a big unit. They're saving 20 points on a big unit, which is nothing to sneeze at.
Cool. So we'll move on to the Reavers. These are the jet bikes, the dark jet bikes, and they're fast. These guys move 18 inches. And,
that's crazy fast.
Yeah. So what's their role within the army? Because they're ridiculously fast, Dan. But what do you see them doing?
Yeah, these are the units that are probably the one that's probably the most talked about of this new book. They are so cool. Like you said, move 18. There's ways to get them to move further. They get extra bonuses. They're 2 wounds each. They are way too cool. They can advance and charge with some situations, but the big thing with them is the role that they're going to play is like you said, the fastest unit. That in like the book, I think.
Maybe even the game.
Yeah, they're one of the fastest units in the game right now.
So they're gonna be probably the unit you're gonna see come flying at you from turn 1 from nowhere and tie up your entire army, so you can't shoot the rest of the Dark Eldar.
They are incredible. One of my favorite units in the book. They benefited from a huge point decrease. From 30 points, they went to 19 points. They have strength 4 attacks in combat with a -1 AP. They're just incredible. They have got good weapon choices and options that you can kind of mix and match, and they can fit a variety of roles like tire uppers or character snipers with some of the cool stratagems as well.
Yeah, and they're one of the nicest models in the game.
They look incredible. They're so cool to paint. Yeah.
Yeah. The big one with them is when they had the other thing, I guess, speed wise, is when you advance, you auto advance 8, right?
Yeah.
So that's 26. There's, like we said before, there's a combat jug that adds 2 to that, and I'm sure Riven already said +2 to its movement again from a stratagem. So you're looking at 30 inches guaranteed, and potentially also being able to charge depending on what obsession you pick.
Yeah,
yep.
You're like, that objective is mine. Thank you. I'll take it. I'll score those points. Enjoy.
Or anything you want. You're there. It's pretty amazing.
And
now,
they
would
fly,
you guys
right?
take?
So you can fly over screens too.
Yeah, easily. Speaking of that, when you fly over stuff, you can hit them. So that's great.
Yeah, they brought back the old flyby. It's
Yeah.
amazing when you advance over things. You can slice them and do mortal wounds. It's great.
Yeah. Now, would you take Grav Talons or would you take the Cluster Caltrops?
I feel that the Grav Talon is better because you can control when it's used.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
Yeah. So a Grav Talon, for anybody who doesn't know, 1 in 3 bikes can take a Grav Talon. It's when you charge, as long as the Grav Talon is near the enemy on a 4+, they take a mortal wound as they charge in.
That's terrible. I'm scared of these guys.
Yeah, they're gonna be something else.
They're gonna be everywhere.
They're gonna get eaten. Next, we're gonna move on to one of my favorite models, and the Hellions. These guys are a fast attack choice. They're not quite as fast, but they still move 14 inches, which is crazy. They have the standard Dark Eldar stats, which leaves them a little bit, I guess, squishy, you could say.
Yeah.
But they do have hit and run, which means that they can fall back and charge, which is amazing. So they can't really get tied down, and they just go in and do some damage. I like them, but I feel like they're just a little bit too fragile. What do you think?
I would tend to agree with that statement. They will hit. They're the epitome of what Dark Eldar is. They can hit with a ton of bricks. They're relatively cheap. And the thing is, they're competing for a slot with Reaver jet bikes. And to be honest, for 5 more points, a Reaver jet bike is just so much better.
Is that it, eh? Wow.
What if these guys had the Witch invulnerable save?
See, that, like a Jink. Before, in the old book, they had Jink. I feel if they would have given, not a Witch, but even just a 6-up invul save, being able to Jink from damage, I think that would have really tipped the scale in some scenarios.
Because they are witches, right? They're essentially witches on hoverboards. So why don't they have a 4?
Really.
They're their own thing. They have
they're like just outcasts and like criminals.
But they're
like the skater kids of the Dark Eldar.
Yeah, they're the alley cats that kind of get together and have no home.
They just chill the skate park too long.
Yep.
Yeah.
Go around knocking over people's mailboxes.
That's exactly what they would do. Yeah. Agonizers or the Hellglaives are just baseball bats. That's all.
Yeah. That's all they do. But they are super fast, and it really depends on the obsession. So depending on what obsession you run, and they can come in blobs of 20. So you can use them as a very big screen that just doesn't run away, for example, with +1 strength, which means they'd be strength 5 with their Hellglaives with 2 damage attacks. So the amount of damage output they can do is great, but you just can't just throw them out there. You'd have to be very surgical with them for them to really come into their own in the game.
But even then, a stiff breeze and they're gone.
Oh yeah, if somebody sneezes in that direction, they're dead.
That's just such a turn off.
They have the infantry keyword, right? So they get all the benefits of all the potential stratagems, especially, and I think this is the key, and the only way you're going to see Hellions properly used is deep striking them. Yes,
you can deep strike them, but if you're using screaming jets, you can't deep strike them. So that's a bit of a shame.
Well, I don't know. I think you'd still have options though.
Well, 100%. I think the biggest option for them would be to keep them in blocks of cover and then using Strike from the Shadows to add 2 to their cover save. So they'd go to a 3-up save wing cover.
Yeah, that could be a thing. That's definitely a possibility. Is that only 1 CP or is that multiple?
It's, I believe, 1 CP.
Okay, that makes sense. Anyway, we're jumping ahead, but...
No, it's all good. That's awesome. So the next unit, which I really like, is Scourges. How do you see them? You like those guys, Dan?
I think they seem great. They have the same ability of automatically deep striking. Mm-hmm. These are the I guess the dark swooping hawks. That's the word. Move 14, hitting on 3s. The 4+ save is actually really nice. Having a 4+ save in a Dark Eldar army is not that common.
They also have a 6-up invul.
Yep, that lovely 6-up, and then the 6-up feel no pain. They're basically unkillable. They're unkillable.
You'd be surprised
compared to the Hellions.
For sure, it's something. The big thing I think, and the reason you'll see these guys or why you're going to be using these is they're deep strikeable, functionally devastator units. They're going to be toting your 4 heavy weapons or your 4 super attack weapons that are going to deep strike, blow something up, and maybe survive.
Fire and fade, buddy. Fire and fade.
Yeah, it will be. I think this is something that you could definitely see being used. Whether you see it in match play or not, it's going to be a tough one because I have a feeling once you stack up all the weapons, they're going to get pricey.
Oh yeah.
Not at all.
No, okay. What do you think?
Well, they come at 60 points for 5, so they're 12 points apiece.
Seems
And
expensive.
some of the best weapons they have are only 8 points.
Which is
The Shredder.
oh,
The Shredder. The Shredder.
Assault D6, 12 inches, strength 6, -1 to your save. When attacking infantry, reroll failed to wound. Yeah, that's not too
I guess
shabby.
it's okay.
Yeah, you get 4d6 shots, and the unit only comes up to 96 points or something with an inherent deep strike, with fire and fade and other pressure points, and using it's actually it's quite cool.
Yeah, on average, 14 strength 6 shots. That's yeah, it's not bad. Not
Pretty
bad.
good. Well, here's the big question, though, Urban. Being the senior Dark Eldar player, Blaster, Heat Lance.
Right now, Blaster's definitely winning out for me,
Okay.
just because of the extra strength.
It's something we didn't say yet. One big jump up ahead of Dark Eldar that we got was that all blast things went up to D6 damage. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, blast pistols, blasters, that's huge. That's not just a little deal, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So next one, I'm going to give this to Ridvin because this is one of his favorite units, the Talos or Talos.
Ooh, the Talos. The Talos really, really improved from Index to Codex. The Talos are essentially the pain machines of the homunculi. They're tasked to essentially farm flesh.
That sounds
That's-
awful. It's not even funny.
It does. It sounds disgusting.
Yeah,
what do
that's-
they do? Just like have all these like fields of flesh. It kind of reminds me of Rick and Morty when they go on the butt planet. Except this is like the butt planet farmer.
Yeah, no, they essentially just they harvest organic matter for the homunculi. So basically, just bits of flesh and tissue, and they're just killing machines. Essentially, they go in and you can equip them with a variety of different weapon options, and they are like little dreadnoughts. They've got an invulnerable save. They hit well in combat. They have decent shooting. They hit on 4s shooting. They have 5 attacks. Their strength and toughness 6. They got like 7 wounds or so, which means that they're not just going to get insta-give by a D6 shot that gets through. Where it gets really cool is the fact that they have the insensible to pain roll, which is the same thing all Coven units have, giving them a 5+ invulnerable save, which can be increased to 4-up with an obsession. And they also benefit from power from pain, which means that they can reroll charges on turn 2. They can get +1 to their weapon skill, +1 to hit, in combat starting on turn 3. And they can have some really cool close combat and shooting options, from haywire blasters to kill tanks, all the way to my favorite weapon right now, which is the chain flail. That doubles its attacks to 10 attacks and rerolls wounds in combat. So they become little chaff mulching machines.
Yeah, and you could take 3 of them in a unit. You could take Rackhearth, which of course they get their +1s. They go up to a 4+, and they go up to basically toughness 7, strength 7.
Yes.
It's crazy. It's such a little it's a Death Star. It's a functional little Death Star again.
Yeah, especially the
great.
4-up invul, 7 wounds. So toughness 7, most things are wounding you on like 4s. You're looking at somebody's gonna have to do 28 hits on you with something decent to take you out.
That's like an actual durable unit, and that's not something Dark Eldar excels at.
And what I'm using them for right now, my 2,000 point list has 3 Talos, and they're just single Talos, and even just single Taloses have been so tough to crack. They're my screen. They push things back, because if they get charged or get shot, they're really durable, surprisingly durable.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on to the Chronos, because I'm gonna have nightmares now.
And in stark contrast, we have
crap.
They, you know what? They have tentacly arms, man. They look cool. they help other people be better.
They can look cool on my shelf. Yay!
Reroll wound rolls of 1 within 6 inches. Woo!
Hey, in the fight phase, of course.
In the fight phase,
100%.
yeah. If it was shooting phase, I'd be like, yeah, one of these in the back with all my other stuff. Crazy.
Yeah, that could be a thing. That could really
be a thing. But it is not a thing.
No.
You can regain like lost wounds with it.
It did get better from the index. Like, it's better than it was in the index. It's cheaper. You don't have to kill something. You just have to do a wound to something to regenerate wounds on stuff. So it's not like absolutely terrible, but it is pretty terrible for match play. Play in a friend. In my friendly games, I take a Kronos and a Talos, and they kind of like they're little buddies together. But in a match play game, I don't think you'll see Kronos very often.
It's too bad.
So now we're going to move on to the Ravager, which is basically a raider with lots of guns on it. And so basically a skimmer tank. You can have up to 3 Dark Lances, or you can do 3 Disintegrator Cannons. This thing's pretty solid, staple kind of gun platform of the Dark Eldar army. They've been good since 3rd edition. They just die really easily. But these ones actually don't. Toughness 6, 10 wounds, 4+ save. You can also give them +1 toughness, right?
This is the one that doesn't work on.
It doesn't work on Ravagers, so they're not. Never mind.
Yeah, they're Cabal. Like a very similar unit is the Forge-World Reaper, which is essentially a Ravager with more wounds and up to double the amount of launch shots. So
I think this is the
Ravagers. Do I use Ravagers? I find a state. Yes, I use 2 to 3 Ravagers in pretty much every list I build. With the increase in blaster weaponry going to D6 damage, though, and the decrease of points of disintegrator cannons, I feel like Ravagers are going to be seen a lot more with the triple disintegrator variety now, which is 9, strength 5, -3, 2 damage shots.
Yeah, that's good.
For 120 with 125 points. Yeah.
Yeah, this is I think this is the hot nasty of this codex. I think this is going to be the thing that, like, there is going to be a build that you run 9 of these things, and I think you can actually reach critical mass at that point and truly decimate somebody. I think that's a build that, while obnoxious, obviously, I think that's a real thing.
I was toying with a build that had, about 9 Ravagers, 9 disintegrated Ravagers, and 100 Foot Witches, like we talked on before.
That sounds amazing.
It's very, very nasty.
Yeah, I think there's a serious potential for that.
It's too bad they didn't give them the ability to take a Homunculus Coven, because that would be so gross if they could be toughness 7.
I think that would be a little bit crazy, yeah. But it's definitely a cap-like kind of unit.
But if you use Forge Roll, just take Reapers. They just do lance shots instead. But it's essentially the same thing with 2 more wounds and toughness 7. It can come in handy.
Yeah.
But it's funny that you take a Raider, which is basically a Ravager, segue to the next unit. You remove 2 of the guns from it, and then you can give it all these crazy abilities. It has a 5-up invulnerable save. You can add on Splinter Racks if you want to. But you only get 1 Disintegrator Cannon or 1 Dark Lance. But even this, a bunch of these loaded to the, I was going to say tits, but I'm just going to say it. Loaded to the tits with with like witches, and then Disintegrator Cannons could be pretty deadly on its own. Yeah. They do move 14 inches when they have a remaining wounds, 6 to 10. So that's fast, right? And even if they get blown up, you dump your witches out 14 inches closer to the enemy. It's pretty good. And then once the cargo's gone, if they're alive, they just shoot their Disintegrator Cannons. So I like them. Do you use them, or do you prefer to run like hordes of infantry?
Me?
Yeah.
I love Raiders. Raiders are great. Raiders and Venoms are 2 of the coolest dedicated transports in the entire 40k universe, and Raiders went down like 25 points each.
So that puts them at what's their total points now?
So they are 65 points base without a gun. So you can give a Disintegrator Cannon at 80 points for a 10 wounded, toughness 5 or 6 if they're in a coven, tank that all the models inside can shoot out of. can have some cool war gear options, has a 5+ invulnerable save, and moves really, really fast. Now, one of the cool things to note is Raiders and Venoms carry Drukhari infantry specifically. They do not have to carry Cabal, Coven, or Witch units specifically.
What do you mean by that?
Put Incubi in.
So you can put Incubi in there. You can put a Succubus in a Cabal Raider. You can put a Homunculus in a Witch Cult Raider. So, for example, if you wanted to run a Cabal of the Flayed Skull, which gives all your Raiders +3 movement, right? And then you could put your Witches inside of them, and they're in faster Raiders now.
Yep, pretty good. So we're going to move on to, I think, a unit that you talked up before the cast there, Ridvan. Venoms.
I like Venoms. They're cheap now. They went down 20 points apiece with 2 cannons. Venoms are -1 to hit. They move 16 inches. They have 6 wounds. They're like a little gunboat. And I run 6 of them in any competitive list.
Dirty.
And they put out 12 poison shots at 18 inches. And with a 16-inch move, they have, they can hit anything within, 32 inches of them.
And they only have 6 wounds, but they don't get worse when you shoot them. They're one of the few vehicles.
No, they don't degenerate. And when we get to obsessions, there's one that gives them a 6+ feel no pain. Ooh. So you can either make them all Coven and have them be toughness 6, or you can make them like with a character nearby, or you can make them, move extra inches and move 19 inches instead of 16, or you can make them a witch cult that can advance and charge, so you can advance them all and charge things and tie things up with venoms. There's so many things you can do with even the transports.
Now, you run 6. Do you ever see a list with maybe way more than that?
I run 6, but usually you'll see that many. Like in the heyday, Venom spam was, I think, 8 or 12 Venoms or something. So people will have 8 or 12 and you might see them, but I feel like there's a sweet spot for the Venom because there's a lot of things that can kill Venoms quickly, and you need to have other units in your army that will detract from shooting the Venoms.
Okay, Dan, you had a point there?
Oh, I think one interesting thing is that all of the transports and vehicles have blade veins. Mm-hmm. And they all hit on 4s. Like these things, strength 4, -1 hitting on 4s, it's actually going to do something. I think a lot of people just assume transports can't do stuff anymore, right? They slap in, hitting on 6s, doing nothing. These guys will actually, kill a model or 2.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah,
which I think is really cool.
So there is no Lord of Wars in this book, which I found a little bit frustrating that there was no... there wasn't a lot of special characters, no Lord of War choice, nothing big to kind of flush it out. So we'll move on to the flyers. We have 2 options. We'll start with the Razorwing Jet Fighter. This guy wasn't super popular in past editions. Is he going to be popular now, Dan?
I think there is definitely potential. I like that in previous iterations of this unit, you had to pick which type of missile you wanted to bring with you, where now you can just pick when you shoot. I think that alone is a pretty big boost for its potential. Again, the invul is great. The minus to hit is great. I think all of the missiles are pretty good, actually. I like all of them.
Yeah, the missiles are great, and they've one of the best missiles they changed was the Necrotoxin missile. Went from Assault D6 to Assault 3D3, which really increases the anti-infantry capability of the Razorwing.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot of shots, a lot of potential. They have a flyer snipe. It is cheap. That is nice. But being able to flyer snipe with these things is so cool. And having those different options for weaponry is going to change that. So yeah, there's potential.
Yeah, and that's a big thing nowadays, taking a counter flyer kind of list.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we have
another cool thing. Sorry, one of the cool things you have to remember is when we get to the stratagems. These are one of the only flies you can now deep strike.
That's true. So we're gonna move on to the Void Raven Bomber. Now these things were pretty good actually in the index. I played against a list with 3 of them a couple of times. They did a lot of damage, and they were able to move pretty fast. Do you think they're still going to be something that people take, Ridvan?
I believe so. I think that Void Mine is really the reason that you would be taking them. Once per game, mortal wounds on a 3+ against the unit, and that you pick the one big nasty unit your opponent has, and just run and roll 10 dice, and for every 3 you roll, like, something dies. I've taken out big tough units, or soften them up at least. It's definitely overshadowed by the Razorwing a little bit in terms of point value. I feel like the Razorwing's versatility wins out. But in a pinch, you have strength 9 lances. So if you have a friend that likes to bring a lot of toughness 8 vehicles, hey, that might be the thing for you.
Yeah, a couple strength 9 shots, -4 d6 damage. You're going to take something out pretty quickly. I think the Void Mine would be good. You could run 3 of them. You fly over something. You could decimate a unit and kind of shoot at range. But how expensive is the bomber compared to the Razorwing? Like, what's the difference? Like, is the Razorwing Dark Angel cheap, or is it? The
Razorwing's 105 points plus weapons. So the cheapest loadout for a Razorwing is with 2 disintegrator cannons, which is 135 points. For all the missiles, which are free, the disintegrator cannons, and a twin splinter rifle on the front. So it comes to 135 points. It's a great flyer. It's a fantastic flyer, in my opinion.
That's cheap, yeah.
Yeah. The Void Raven Bomber, I believe, starts at 50 points more, which would make it 155 points. And then I believe that... hold on, just let me check real quick here. So the Dark Side is 0 points, and the Void Raven missiles are 10, and the Void Lance. So it's 155 points stock. If you give it missiles, it's 165 points. So it's only 20 points more.
Yeah, it's not
if
crazy,
you run
man.
it stock. It's not terrible. Yeah.
The missiles are actually pretty good too.
Yeah, they're not bad.
Yeah,
I think the Void Mine is bizarre. I think it's just so hit and miss, and like the every other wording.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I get what you mean.
Like 1d6 for every other model. So if I over 10 man, you roll a 5.
Yeah, it's almost like they could have done something a little bit different. Like, maybe you need a 6 followed by a 4. I don't know.
That's
or
bizarre.
on a 4+, they take a mortal wound on a 6. I don't know.
Well, why is it only once?
No, here it is. It just says you pick an enemy unit, roll 3 dice for each vehicle in the unit, or 1d6 for every other model in the unit. So if it's not a vehicle or monster, just 1 dice for each model. If it's a vehicle, it's 3 dice for each model.
Or 1d6 for every other model in the unit.
Yeah, that's not a vehicle or monster, right?
Well, 3d6. Yeah. Maybe I'm reading this wording differently than you are.
Yeah. No, I understand how you're reading it, but it's, you say for each vehicle or model, or a d6 for every other model. So anything that's not vehicle or monster. Okay. You can't look at that sentence in a vacuum.
I don't know. It's bizarre.
It's still bizarre. It's a bizarre wording. Like, I could definitely see there being some arguments over that wording.
Mm-hmm.
So moving into some of the army-wide special rules, the way this codex is written, they're a bit separated. So this is the Comorite Raiders, and it basically covers some of the more matched play and army-wise synergistic rules, which is something new for Warhammer 8th edition. So take it away, Skari.
Okay, so we went through a couple of things as we discussed in the army overview, the Court of the Archon, the Drukhari Beasts. So if you have any Inari units, it just states that if they are a reborn army, then they are no longer a Drukhari detachment. So they don't get any Drukhari benefits from, Vanguard of the Dark City or the Obsessions or the Blades for Hire. So Vanguard of the Dark City is just your stock standard objective secured for all Drukhari units in a Battleforged detachment. Your raiding force is something we haven't seen before. It's a special rule that allows Drukhari armies to benefit from patrol detachments and gain command points. which is pretty cool. We haven't actually seen anything like this. Essentially, if you have at least 3 patrol detachments in your Battleforged army, you gain 4 command points. And if you have at least 6 or more Drukhari patrol detachments, you gain 8 command points.
Now that's obviously not for matched play.
Yeah, it's definitely not. Like if you're not going to take 8 patrol detachments in a 2,000 point game. Like, that's just silly. That's definitely meant for like more thematic games. But what you might see in smaller games, especially match play, is the 3 patrol detachments for 4 command points. Essentially, you get 3 HQs and 3 troop units, and you're getting the same amount of command points as a battalion and, say, an outrider or a spearhead or a vanguard, which means that, you could do it for cheaper, which is pretty cool. And then kind of benefit from a lot of the cool things that are in the book itself. And then last but not least, the obsessions. Now, the obsessions are like your generic chapter tactics in like a Space Marine book, or your dynasties in a Necron Codex. They just give you benefits and perks for building an army around a specific theme, like a witch cult, a cabal, or a homunculus coven, which is what we're going to see. And then Blades for Hire, we went over that. Incubi and Mandrakes and Scourge do not block an army from gaining the benefits of their obsessions.
Nice touch.
It's cool. It means that they can flesh out an army. You can collect them regardless of what sort of faction you really want to play. It's neat. I like it's a nice little rule. And now we'll start with the what's right.
Yeah, go ahead. Take away the Cabal obsessions.
Okay. So I'll start with the Cabal obsessions. So the Cabal obsessions are probably the ones you are more than likely going to see more often than not if you play against or with Drukhari. There are 4 obsessions. I'm going to start with the Cabal of the Obsidian Rose. That's probably the one that you like. I'm not a huge fan of it, but the range of all rapid-fire assault and heavy weapons used by units increased by 6 inches. So you can't use it on relics or the Medusa's Eye Burst, which is like a flamer weapon. Mm-hmm. It's not bad. It means your lances, disintegrators, blasters, they all go up 6 inches more. So, you can kind of sit back more and shoot, which is great. If you want to sit back and shoot and that's your style, or you play a lot of hammer and anvil, sure, go right ahead. That sounds fun. Then we have the Cabal of the Poisoned Tongue. Now, this one and the Cabal of the Flayed Skull both have very similar traits. And the Poisoned Tongue essentially allows you to reroll wound rolls. So any wound rolls of 1 for all melee weapons and poison weapons used by models with this obsession. Now, you cannot use it with any of the relics, but this does mean that any venom that you're using is rerolling 1s to wound. It means that any Cabalite warrior with a splinter rifle is rerolling 1s to wound when shooting with a splinter rifle. It means that in close combat, if you have, an Archon or even your Cabalite warriors running into combat, they're rerolling 1s to wound with any and all of their close combat weapons. This, is like having a Space Marine lieutenant next to your army for the entire game all the time. And that adds up pretty quick if you're playing a 6-turn game.
Oh, for sure.
Right? It's definitely, like, I don't know about you guys, but that's pretty cool. It's one of my favorites. Now, they also have access, as we'll see later in the stratagems, to one of my favorite stratagems, which we'll get to after that, which makes choosing an obsession, definitely not as easy a choice as it might seem at first. Then the next obsession is the Cabal of the Flayed Skull. Now, this Cabal is for someone who loves putting a bunch of units in transports and making the transports better, at the same time just flying around the board, just shooting stuff. So what it does is it adds 3 inches to the move characteristics of all models with this obsession that can fly. That's every model that can fly moves 3 more inches. That's all your Raiders, all your Ravagers, all your Venoms, all your like razor-wing jet fighters now can move 75 inches instead of 72.
Jesus.
Right, so they can get anywhere on the board that you want. Makes Venoms move 19 inches, which is crazy fast.
That's fast.
Crazy.
It's crazy fast. I've played it one game. They were just everywhere. And in addition, enemy units do not receive the benefit for cover against attacks made by models with this obsession that can fly. So, you know, your Dark Lance Ravagers or your Razor Wings, you know, jet fighters, they're going to be ignoring the enemy's cover as they try and huddle from your Dark Lance poison weaponry, which is pretty cool. And any units that are embarked on a transport, you know, that can fly, so any units inside of Venoms or inside of Raiders, also ignore cover, and they reroll hits of 1 when shooting with rapid-fire weapons, which essentially gives them reroll 1s like Aura as long as they're within their transport.
It's pretty crazy.
It's crazy.
Especially with disintegrators being assault. Yeah.
Yeah, well, which is good, but it only affects rapid-fire weapons.
Yeah, but you can move them. I'm just saying, like, you can move these guys so fast.
Right.
You're not -1 to hit because you're shooting assault weapons. Jeez. Yeah. Like, you're going to be everywhere, and you're ignoring cover for stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Whew. Yeah, and so they will be all around the board, and they will be everywhere, and they'll be shooting at you with a bunch of stuff. And the last but not least, we've got the Cabal of the Black Heart. Now, this is basically any affiliate of Vect's personal Cabal, and it's, in my opinion, the strongest. It's the one that I've been using the most. Units with this obsession that have the Power from Pain ability, which is the rule that we saw earlier, treat the current round as being 1 turn more than it actually is. So turn 1, they count it as being turn 2. So they're rerolling charges starting on turn 1. They're getting the +1 to hit in combat starting turn 2, and they all become fearless starting turn 3.
That's pretty good. That's really good. Fearless turn 3.
Good. So
yes.
good.
It's really good. In addition, any unit that does not have the Power from Pain ability instead gains the Injured to Suffering bonus, which is the 6+ save to ignore wounds. Now, this applies to any and all vehicles with the Cabal rule. So now every Cabal vehicle you're running also has a 6+ Feel No Pain.
Wow.
Good stuff. I think the one thing with this codex is every single one of these things is good.
It's great, and I want to be able to take all of them because they just stack in different ways. But because they're so good, you're going to have to start making choices of what's worth taking versus what, depending on what you want to build. And I don't think Dark Elder have ever really had that sort of flexibility and option taking before.
Mm-hmm.
But they should, right? They're that style of list where they should have that kind of choice and that kind of specialty. And you should have to craft your list and choose its abilities to kind of match, because otherwise, they're just too elite and too fast to do otherwise. So we're going to move on to the Witch Cult Obsessions. So take it away, Dan.
Okay, so the witch cults are the ones about the witches and the Hellions and all those fun things. Not Hellions. We discussed that earlier. All the witches and the Reavers is what we're talking about.
But they are witches, though. They do get a witch cult, right?
Yeah, they do right? Count as cult when they go to war. Just like we were just talking fluff.
But they don't get the rules and fluff-wise. They're just skater punks.
Even better. I think that's the right way to go.
Yeah.
So first one on the list, Cult of Strife. Increase the attacks characteristics of a model of this is obsession by 1 when they charge, were charged, or made a heroic intervention. So an extra attack when you charge. Pretty great. This is also the one that Lilith is attached to.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty good. The next one, Cult of Cursed Blade. You increase your strength by 1, which is also really good. But my favorite part about this whole one is that you only lose 1 model to failing a morale test.
That's crazy good if you're taking like 20-man witch units or 20 girl witch units or 20 witch
I think there's girls and guys in witches, if I remember correctly, but I could be wrong.
They do mix, yes.
Yeah. Just increasing your strength by 1 would be good. but you get both of these. Yeah, now we're talking. And the last one, Cult of the Red Grief. Units of Obsession can charge in the same turn in which they advanced. In addition, they re-roll failed charges.
I like it.
So you've got something that is incredibly fast, and something that hits harder, and something that just hits more. Every single one, like I said, is functional and good. I think, I don't know. I think you're probably going to see Cult of the Red Grief commonly, especially if people are running the Reaver jet bikes in a way that they want to use them to tie up your entire army.
Yeah.
But I think Max Witch Army would probably be Cult of the Cursed Blade.
Oh, for sure. Just to save on the leadership.
Yeah, strength 4. Like, strength 4 is a pretty big deal.
Mm-hmm. The leadership
combine that with the leadership is great, but combine it with like combat drugs, make them strength 5, or double it with a stratagem, make them strength 6.
Yeah,
and they have 3 attacks each. Like that's
pretty scary.
Yeah, it adds up pretty quick.
Oh, yeah.
Like going to strength 6 on 30, 40, 50 attacks.
No, that's awesome. So we'll move on to the Homunculus Coven Obsessions. The first one is the Prophet of Flesh, Connoisseurs of Pain. Basically, their invulnerable save is increased by 1 to a 4+, which we talked about a little bit earlier. So that affects things like Taloses and Homunculi, I guess you could say, because they're singular. The next one is the Dark Creed, Distillers of Fear. So they take your fear, they distill it into a nice vodka-like drink. Models and enemy units must subtract 1 from their leadership characteristic for each unit with this obsession within 6 to a maximum of -3. Let down a little bit there, especially when you're talking about +1 invulnerable save, and you're like, oh, -1 to your leadership if I have 3 units within.
Definitely not like your most competitive choice.
Next one is Covens of 12, Butchers of Flesh. They improve the armor penetration characteristic of all melee weapons used by models with this obsession by 1. So if you have no armor penetration, you go down to -1, and so on. So it makes a lot of your stuff a little bit more killy in combat. I think of these, I don't know why, but I constantly fixate on the Prophets of Flesh, just because the Taloses with a 4+ is disgusting.
Yeah, sadly, this is probably one that is you're gonna see the Prophets of Flesh. Like, you're probably not gonna see the other two,
or not.
Now, definitely, the other two have really cool stratagems, which we'll get to later. So if you want to build those into a list, that's probably why you'll take them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other ways to manipulate leadership in this book. So if you did want to try and do some sort of crazy counter-meta leadership shenanigan army, it's possible. And then, of course, the -1 armor penetration. Hey, if you have a unit of 3 Talos, all with chain flails, I don't care how many invuls they have. If they run in with 30 attacks that have now a -1 AP because they're Coven of 12, I'm okay with that.
That is a good point, because they have so many attacks. But
and the Flesh Gauntlet, or the Monstrous Cleaver going up to -2. Yeah, there's an argument.
There's an argument. Or you'd see none of them, right? Like, it could be really possible that the other ones are just so good, and you can't have unlimited detachments, right? So you're looking at getting 2 to 3 of these maximum, basically, right? So which
100%.
ones do you pick out of the we're looking at kind of them in isolation, but you look at all of them, and I don't know if any of the Homunculus ones are even on the list, but I guess time will tell. So we'll move on to stratagems. Why don't you take us through some of the stratagems? Any that are kind of generic we'll skip over, but anything that's fantastic we can cover. And what do you think of those, Skari?
So we have the Webway Portal. We've seen that before. I'm just going to skip over that one. One of my favorites is the Alliance of Agony. It's 1 CP. You use a stratagem at the start of the battle. If your Archon is a Warlord, you can choose up to a Homunculus and 1 Succubus, and you can generate a Warlord trait for each character you choose. First of all, there has to be an FAQ to make it 1 per army, unless you want to have multiple Warlords. But it does come in handy because you have 3 Warlord traits. So you have an Archon running around, and this is great for 3 detachments. You can have like 2 battalions and then either a spear. So what I've been doing is running 2 battalions and a spearhead, and I have a succubus, an archon, and a homunculus. And the archon takes a cool warlord trait. Then the succubus gets her 3-up invul or another cool warlord trait. And then the homunculus, Prophets of Flesh, can have a warlord trait that gains back D3 command points. And so you're looking at paying for that stratagem and then having 2 more, up 2. So that's pretty cool. That's a nice stratagem. Architects of Pain, basically at the start of the battle round, you can add +1 to the power from Pain. This can be really cool when you're trying to get, and it's cumulative with things like the Cabal of the Black Heart. So if you put it on a big block of Cabalite warriors on turn 2, it would make them fearless. So it's a great way to kind of make things stick around, for example. Or give them +1 to hit or something if you really need it for the turn. Haywire Grenade is something neat. I haven't seen this before, but when you throw a plasma grenade at vehicles, so either a Witch or a Scourge, for 1 command point, they can throw it to a vehicle and do D3 mortal wounds to a vehicle. Pretty cool. It's just 1 CP, D3 mortal wounds to a vehicle. Lightning fast reaction, we've seen that. It's very similar to the Eldar one. 2 CPs, it's -1 to hit a Dark Eldar unit, as long as it's not Coven, because apparently Coven is slow. Then we got the prizes from the Dark City. It's essentially your Relic edition.
Yeah, pretty standard.
Yeah, you've got your Eviscerating Flyby. This is the one we were talking about. Whenever a Witch Cult unit that flies advances, so Reaver jet bikes, Raiders, Venoms, or Helions, you can pick a unit it flies over and roll a d6 for each model in the unit. And on a 6+, they do a mortal wound. If they're an infantry, you add +1. So against infantry, you're doing mortal wounds on 5+. Great with Reaver jet bikes that move like 30 inches a turn. Fleshcraft is basically give wounds back to a homunculus unit, so D3 wounds. Fire and Fade, really cool. Get to move after you shoot, so great to like duck into cover or out of line of sight with a Drukhari unit. Now it's important to note it's any unit, so it can be infantry, it can be a tank like a Ravager, or it could even you could even do it on, say, a flyer if you really need to move a flyer for some reason. Cruel Deception, you can fall back and still shoot and charge with a unit. This is quite useful. So your Talos unit doesn't get tied down in combat.
That's really useful, yeah.
Super useful. The Great Enemy is your classic Eldari stratagem versus Slanesh. So really useful in every game you play. It's not. Release the Beasts is pretty cool. If you run Beasts, allows Beasts to re-roll their charge rolls if they're within 6 inches of Beastmaster. Being someone who plays Beasts, it's great for like fun games. Hyperstim Backlash. Now this is one of the ones you'll see at the start of the battle round. You choose a unit from your army that has combat drugs, and you double the bonus of the combat drug till the end of the battle round. And then you roll a dice and they might like take mortal wounds as they kind of overdose. Now, this is really useful when combining it with things like the Reaver jet bikes that we've seen. Being able to put a screen up of 12 Reaver jet bikes and giving them +1 toughness, and then for 2 command points, making them toughness 6 for a turn, or giving them an extra attack and making them 4 attacks each, or making them move an extra 4 inches instead of 2 inches with their drugs. This has this is one of the, I'm not going to go into much detail, but this is definitely one of those that you have to look out for. Then one of my favorites, Screaming Jets. Pay 1 command point and put a Drukhari vehicle that can fly in Deep Strike Reserve.
Why?
If you pick a transport, all the units inside stay inside the transport. This is incredibly good. One of the things I find is people shoot your Ravagers first to try kill your heavy weapons, and now you can just Deep Strike your Ravagers, and at least you'll get 1 turn of shooting with them before they die, which is great.
You can, in theory, use this multiple times, right?
Yeah, you can use it as long as you have enough units on the battlefield, but you can put a Venom with like 4 characters in it and put 5 Ravagers in reserve. Hooray. Freakish Spectacle. If you fail a morale test within 6 inches of Coven unit, they fail. You lose an extra model. Yeah, situational. The Torturer's Craft. This one I really like. For 2 command points, pick a Coven unit to reroll 2 wound rolls in the fight phase. Yeah. So when you're using that with, say, like the Grotesques with their flesh gauntlets to reroll wounds, and then 6s cause mortal wounds, for example, that can be really handy. Hunt from the Shadows. Does anybody else want to do one or 2 or 4 or 6?
Sure. Hunt from the Shadows. Use a stratagem when a Drukhari infantry unit from your army that is receiving the benefit of cover is targeted in the shooting phase until the end of the phase. Add 2 to the unit's saving throws, which is really good. This is what we actually talked about before.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect involves, just so everybody knows. It's only your armor save. But it is something that can be game-changing, potentially.
Yeah, turn 1, even if you need it, you could use it just to keep that one unit alive, right, that you need there.
Yeah, for sure. So that's a pretty good one. Next one is Pray They Don't Take You Alive. So we're getting nice and thematic now. If you use this stratagem, use a stratagem if a Drukhari unit from your army slays the enemy warlord in fight sub-phase. For the remainder of the battle, every model in the enemy army subtracts 1 from its leadership characteristic.
I like it.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's situational if you can get him in combat, but it definitely, like, over the course of the game, especially at the end with the -1 to leadership from the power from pain, and then say Grizzly trophies or Phantasm grenade launchers, like, it's not like a strategy you can kind of build around, but it can make people run away. It's cool.
Yeah, for sure. Soul Trap. This is actually used to be an item you could take, but now it's stratagem. When your Archon kills an enemy character. For 1 CP, you can increase his strength, leadership, and characteristics by 1 for the remainder of the game.
It's a good enough option.
And attacks. Attacks. Yeah.
Did I not say attacks? Okay.
Yeah.
So you get an extra attack, and you're looking at a pretty deadly little dude.
Very useful with like some relics and stuff. But if you have a Dijin Blade, which is +1 strength, so strength 4, -2 AP, D3 damage, kills like a minor character, say 3 wound or 4 wound character. Then goes up to 6 attacks, strength 5, and then he can go and really kind of hold his own against some of the tougher characters.
Yeah, for sure. Enhanced Aether Sails. When you use a stratagem, a Raider or Ravager arm in your army advances, add 8 to its move characteristic.
Yeah,
instead of roll.
That's the one that you said would combine nicely with the when you could like move, advance, and charge. So now you have your Raiders and Ravagers like into their face. Just tying stuff up. Like, that's really quick for a tank.
Yeah, for sure. Incubi... Oh, sorry, yep.
No, I was going to say yep.
Okay. An Incubi-centric stratagem called Onslaught. When an Incubi unit in your army fights in the fight sub-phase until the end of the phase, each time you roll an unmodified roll of 6, you count as 2 hits instead of 1. Pretty good. It'll be tough to convince me to spend the CP on an Incubi unit. Because either they're going to kill their target or they're not. They're probably not going to need the extra 2 hits, To
be honest, you want them not to kill their target so they don't get shut up, and hopefully that witch can hold them in combat.
Yeah, so maybe the second round of combat, but I don't know. Probably not seen that often. Crucible Malediction. This one's cool. 2 CP. Use the stratagem in your Psychic phase. Select a homunculi from your army. Roll a d6 for every Psyker unit within 12 inches. On a 4+ unit, it takes D3 mortal wounds.
It's nasty, man. Especially against
Pretty
Eldar.
cool.
If you get in there, you suicide one of them in.
Yeah. You can only do this once per game. So it's not like you can do it every turn in a big circle of Psykers. But it could easily finish off or change the tide of like a small characters.
Yeah, and if you allow the index version, this effect is also a war gear option. So
interesting.
You can actually use the index version of the homunculus that has this as a war gear option for free, and then use the CP to do that again, essentially.
Yeah. That's pretty scary.
# disallow index once Codex is released.
Yes. Yeah. I imagine we'll see that in the FAQ in July.
One can hope.
Yeah. Torment Grenade. A kind of a weird one. When you shoot with a Phantasm Grenade Launcher, if the enemy hit and takes any hits from this weapon, in addition to the usual effects, roll 3d6, And if you roll higher than the leadership, they suffer D3 wounds. So
it's not bad considering you can put a torment grenade launcher on a tank. You can put them on raiders.
So you can put a phantasm grenade launcher
Phantasm on a raider. Yeah, it's one of the war gear options. So you could actually have like a raider even do like a couple mortal wounds, and it affects tanks too because tanks have mortal leadership characteristic now.
Yeah. So maybe a finishing off hit. You know, you never know. Because the phantasm grenade launcher lowers their leadership, and then you do the result, right?
Exactly.
So there's something there.
Do it after you've killed their leader and taken him alive, and then
there you go.
-2. Yeah, I know.
And he had 3 homunculi units nearby. No,
-5, bro. Yeah.
And there's a homunculi behind them. There we go. Or sorry, the homunculi, the hemlock.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's ways to do it, but okay, this is the big one.
Do you die if you hit 0?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that's a thing anymore.
So the big one. Let's go on.
The big one. This is the money right here.
This is it.
3 CP. It's called the Agents of Vec. Now, this is a Cabal of the Blackheart stratagem only. Use this stratagem just after your opponent has spent CPs to use a stratagem, but before the effects of the stratagem are resolved. Roll a d6. On a 1, your opponent's stratagem resolved as normal. On a 2 to 5, your opponent's CPs are refunded, but the stratagem they were using is not resolved and cannot be attempted again this phase.
So good.
Yeah, on a 6, the stratagem that they were attempting to use is resolved, and they don't get their CP back.
Oh, add salt to the wound.
Now,
good.
You can't use it before the game or during deployment, but oh my god, this is not just change for the Dark Eldar. This is a whole meta shift.
It is crazy. I cannot. I've had 5 games with the new Drukhari, and I've used this stratagem every time, and every time it has screwed my opponents so badly, because all of 8th edition has essentially been kind of building an army around using 1 or 2 stratagems to give yourself an edge, and taking away that edge is huge.
Yeah, you play your cards right like this, and you can easily win a game just by saying this. Now, there is a chance you'll fail, but of course you might have your own CP to re-roll.
Oh, yes, you do.
I would hope so, but you never know. But
just the look on a Blood Angel player's face, man, when he drops in and he goes to charge, and you're like, no, now you're dead.
Yeah, or a Poxwalker army, right?
That's the big one. Yeah, shut down.
That's a big deal. Or double shooting a Reaper squad, or there are a dozen things that are going to come into play.
Fire and fade, like stopping a fire and fade when you need to kill something. It's so powerful. You know, I've used it against Tyranids and stopped them from advancing twice, and you know, it's so powerful.
Yeah, easily one of the game breakers. Now it is 3 CP, so it is hyper expensive. But
it is.
I think this is the stratagem that will make you pick which Cabal you're using.
Yes. Blackheart.
Yes, that's definitely played Salt. Definitely played Salt for that. The next one is for the Cabal of the Poison Tongue. So it's called Insidious Misdirection. 2 CP. Use a stratagem at the start of your first battle round, but before the first turn has begun. Pick 3 units from the Cabal of the Poison Tongue from your army that are on the battlefield. Immediately remove them and redeploy them.
That's good.
So cool.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Eldar one. The Eldar one works for any Eldar. You know, you can redeploy 3 units. Cool thing is, it's at the start of the first battle round, which is after the CZ initiative roll, which means that you can know who is going first before committing your units.
Yep.
So
move them.
Exactly. So if you put them out in the open and they're going to get shot, you can put them behind line of sight cover, or you know, if your opponent out deployed you and one of your Ravagers is exposed, you can hide it. You know what I mean? And but that is a whole other obsession, which means you have to commit a whole other detachment to the Poison Tongue.
That's true. Which is, they're not. It's not terrible either. Their trait.
No,
that's a reroll ones to wound, right? So
yeah, exactly.
It's not bad.
It's not bad. Yeah.
So I guess we'll move on. Failure is not an option. This one's kind of cool. It's for the Obsidian Rose. Basically, when you fail a morale check, you pick which models are going to flee, and then they basically get to shoot as if it was a shooting phase, or make a single close combat attack as if it was the fight phase. I can't see myself using it, but it's just cool if you want to.
Well, you forgot the last sentence. If any enemy models are slain by any of these attacks, none of the models flee.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty big deal.
Pretty big deal. But you're not. But the Rose one, they're the ones with the extra attack, right?
They're the ones with the extra range.
Range, yeah. So you're not going to see them too often anyway.
I
No.
actually really like that one personally. I'm a big fan of the extra range.
It works very, very well if you're running, say, a large block or a couple of large blocks of 20 Cablite warriors and making their rapid-fire rifles 30 inches and their blasters 24 inches.
I think that's amazing.
Yeah, which if you, say, deep strike them with a webway portal, you can have 40 Cablite warriors rapid-firing at 15 inches and then blasting tanks at 24 inches with their blasters. And if you kill a lot of them to run away, they just have to kill one model, and none of them run away.
Yeah, pretty amazing
Actually, yeah,
stuff.
you're selling me on it now. That's gold. Master of the Shadow Skies for Cabal of the Flayed Skull. Basically, you pick one of your Flayed Skull units, and they add +1 to hit against models that can fly, or units that can fly, just for the one unit.
Mm-hmm.
No method of death beyond our grasp is Cult of the Strife stratagem. Basically, you can use it just after a Cult of Strife unit from your army has destroyed an enemy unit in either the shooting or fight phase. If the enemy unit was destroyed in the shooting phase, your unit can immediately shoot an additional time this phase. If an enemy unit was destroyed in the fight phase, your unit can immediately fight an additional time in this phase. Now, it doesn't say they get to pile in and fight, so that seems kind of weird, but it's also 3 CP, so it's kind of expensive for a unit to shoot twice, or maybe possibly fight twice, but a lot of the other books that have that, it's only like 2 CP, so it's okay. Next one is Concealed Booby Traps. It's Cult of the Cursed Blade stratagem. Use this stratagem when an enemy unit finishes a charge move within 1 inch of a unit from your army that's Cursed of the Blade, or wholly on or within a terrain feature. Roll a die on a 4+, the enemy unit takes D3 mortal wounds.
Yeah, kind of weird, but I mean, kind of cool. I don't know.
Like
It's one of those like end game things where you know your enemy charges like 2 scouts into like your one witch that never ran away because she's a cursed blade, and she's just in cover, and you murder them both with a booby trap. It's like it's 1 CP, but yeah, it's situational.
Yeah.
The next one I actually really like. It's 2 CP. It's Athletic Aerialists. It's basically for the red Cult of the Red Griff. Use it basically before a unit consolidates, and instead of moving towards the nearest enemy unit, you can move up to 6 inches towards the nearest Cult of the Red Grief transport from your army. And if all models and they're moved within 3 inches of the transport, they immediately embark, as if it was their movement phase. So
yeah, that's really good.
This could be abused or could be used to really mess up somebody. You jump out, you nail a unit, you consolidate back, you get back in your transport, and you chill. I like it. Black Cornucopians. Basically use a stratagem at the end of your movement phase. It's for the Prophets of the Flesh, sorry. Pick a unit of Prophets of Flesh racks from your army and remove it from the battlefield. Then send it up again anywhere at full starting strength, wholly within 6 inches of the edge of the battlefield, and more than 9 inches from the enemy. It's basically like what cultists do, except you're doing it on racks.
That's real cool.
Which is awesome. It's so good. I've used it a few times now.
And you don't have to pay points because you're just basically adding models to a unit that already had them, so you don't have to pay any reserve points or anything like that.
No, it's great to use a rack screen that's a 4-up invul rack screen and toughness 5 thanks to the +1 toughness, and you move them up the board until like 1 or 2 are left, and then you recycle them and take an objective in the backfield or flank someone. It's good.
Next one is an Esoteric Kill delivered from afar. That's a pretty intense name.
I love it.
The Dark Creed stratagem. This is for Dark Creed. Use the stratagem when you select a Dark Creed unit to shoot within the shooting phase. To the end of the phase, models in that unit can target enemy characters, even though they are not the closest. This is awesome.
So good.
It's good when you use it on like Talus, because that's the only thing that can really shoot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or a Tantalus.
Yeah, okay. I guess a Tantalus would be pretty stupid.
Well, you can use it on.
Stupid 4-year-old. Get out of here, 4-year-old.
You could have racks with some kind of gun, right? Shoot.
Well,
it's not
they just
effective.
have those ossifactor ones. So.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
4 shots. You pick a character, you might do a mortal wound to him, might kill him.
Yeah, but you're really gonna do this with the Talos, like
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the unit Talos.
I was trying to be
jump
different,
CP. Yeah, but that's
With the
that's
heat
really
lances, if you run heat lances, this would work really well for Talos. Like 3 Talos with 2 heat lances each. That's 6
Yeah.
heat lances at 18 inches, strength 6, -5, d6 damage. Like if you want to snipe characters, this gives you a really good option instead of
Yeah.
having to run like sniper scouts or anything.
well because you don't have them.
Exactly.
This could be this. Yeah, you could kill Gilliman. You could take out somebody pretty serious with that, and then of course your Talos just jump into something and murder it in combat.
Exactly.
Okay, last one is Administrator Punishment. It's for the Coven of 12. Use this stratagem when you select a Coven of 12 unit from your army to shoot within the shooting phase. Until the end of the phase, models in that unit can target enemy units that are within 1 inch of friendly Coven of 12 units, but each time you roll a hit of a 1 for such an attack is instead resolved against one of your Coven of 12 units that is within 1 inch of the target. You get to decide which one. So basically, for example, for weapons that hit automatically, roll a d6 for each hit. On a 1 to 3, that it's resolved against one of your units. On a 4+, it's resolved against the target. This stratagem cannot be used in the shooting phase this cannot be used if the shooting unit is itself within 1 inch of an enemy unit. So it basically kind of lets you shoot into combat for 1 CP.
Yeah, it's a very convoluted way of saying shoot into combat and you might hit your own guys.
Yeah. I guess it could work if you really need to kill a couple dudes to force a leadership check off an objective. But then that's assuming that you're taking Coven of 12. So it's probably not going to see a lot of action.
It'd be great if you were like really, to just get them out of combat so you could charge something else or whatever, that even might come into play.
Yeah. So we're nearing the end of the book. We have 2 sections left, artifacts and warlord traits. So what I'm going to get Skari to do is just because most artifacts, let's face it, in 40k are just not that great. So any that stick out, that are game-changing or that you would take.
Yes, the Dark Elder artifacts, the artifacts of cruelty, are quite interesting because everything in this book is based on what obsession you took, what warlord trait you took, and what unit bonuses you're using, as well as what stratagems you want to use. So a relic might not look good, but it can really work well in a certain context. So we've got the Parasite's Kiss, which is your essentially 2 damage pistol that can regain wounds, nothing crazy. The Dijin Blade. So this one's one of the fun ones. Essentially, it's a husk blade that's like a named husk blade, and it gives you 2 extra attacks. It increases the AP of the weapon to -3. It's +1 strength, -3 AP, and D3 damage. You can give it to an Archon, and every time he fights with it, on a 1, he takes a mortal wound. But what this does, it makes your Archon 7 attacks standard that hit on 2s, rerolling 1s at strength 4 with -1, -3 AP, D3 damage. So it makes your Archon a very nasty close combat character. And if you make it if you soul trap, then it goes up to strength 5. It's pretty good. The Helm of Spite. This is one of my favorite pieces of gear in this book. The bearer can attempt to deny 1 psychic power each psychic phase. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but in addition, every time he successfully denies the witch, the psyker that attempted the power suffers the perils of the warp.
Oh yeah, combine
Pretty
that with
good.
that stratagem, and you can kill a lot of psychers, man.
So this is not something I'd use as my standard relic, because not all armies have psychers, but I would definitely take this in every game that had some. And every time I've used it, it's done mortal wounds to a psyker, because there's psychers that just want to try cast a smite on a 5 or something, and it's great. It's awesome. The Nightmare Doll basically
That's
makes
terrifying.
the Nightmare Doll. You can give it to a Homunculus. Basically, they ignore wounds on a 4+ instead of a 6+. Makes them tougher. The Animus Vitae pretty lackluster. It's just like a once per game, like silly thing. It'd be very hard to pull off. It doesn't really make any sense. So I'm going to skip it. The Triptych Whip. It's a succubus with an agonizer. And this agonizer gives 3 additional attacks.
Ooh. That's good.
So she has 7 attacks with an agonizer. Great if you're doing Cult of Strife, you can give her a warlord trait. If she rolls a 6 to hit, she gets 3 additional hits for every hit of a 6. So if plus her 1 attack for the obsession, so you'd have 8 attacks base, and then you could have up to for every 6 to hit, that's 3 hits instead of 1 with 8 attacks out of one little 50-point model. That's not bad.
Not bad.
The Writ of the Living Muse. This is a Cabal of the Black Heart stratagem. It's an Archon only, and it's reroll wound rolls of 1 to all units within 6 inches. This is probably one of the relics you're going to see a lot on an Archon, and stick him next to a unit of Ravagers, and they're rerolling 1s to hit and rerolling 1s to wound.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, he's good. That is a very good relic. The Soul Seeker is a Poison Tongue pistol. It's a 2-shot pistol with an 18-inch range that can shoot characters even though they're not the closest, and can also shoot them out of line of sight. And it's also -1 AP and D3 damage.
Mm-hmm.
That wounds on 2s, right?
It does. Yeah, it does. It wounds on 2s, -1 AP, D3 damage, 18 inches, 2 shots, and you can shoot characters that are out of line of sight and not the closest. That one's really fun. Yeah,
It's pretty funny.
The Armor of Misery, it's the Obsidian Rose. Basically gives an Archon a 3+ armor save and -1 to hit the Archon in the fight phase. Not
That's
terrible.
pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good, especially after you fail that Shadowfield save, which always happens.
Yeah.
Cabal of the Flayed Skull, Archon relic. The first time this model fails its invulnerable save, it gains a 4+ invulnerable save. So essentially, if your Shadowfield shuts out after the first last gun hit, you get a 4+ invul.
Yeah, not bad.
It's not terrible. It keeps him alive. The File Bouquet, essentially, it's a combat drug thing that's imprinted into a witch cult's spinal cord. It's pretty fun. Roll a d6 at the start of each battle round to determine a combat drug. Or you can just pick a combat drug at the start of each battle round for your Cult of Strife warlord. +1 strength,
cool.
+1 attack. You just pick it, and it just lasts the whole battle round. Pretty cool.
I'm gonna choose pick over roll, personally.
Oh, yeah. 100%. So,
No way you're talking about.
so you can, especially, there's some cool stuff you can do with that. Traitor's Embrace. Cult of the Cursed Blade Succubus. If the succubus is slain in the fight phase, on a 2+, the unit that killed her suffers D6 mortal wounds.
Jeez, somebody's getting killed by a dog.
Yeah. It was all about the Traitor's Embrace. AKA, if they kill your succubus, they take D6 mortal wounds. It's pretty cool.
Maybe he named his dog Traitor, and then the dog wanted an embrace.
Sorry, Jen.
Yeah. Then we got the Blood Glaive, which is the Cult of the Red Grief. It's basically the Power Fist I was talking about earlier. It's a Power Fist that has +3 strength, -3 AP, D3 damage, and it's doesn't suffer negatives to hit. So it's a good one for just a generic succubus.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have one of my favorites. So this is another one of my favorites. It's called the Vexeter Mask. So this is a Prophets of Flesh, homunculus only. And the enemy units cannot fire Overwatch against the bearer. In addition, at the start of each fight phase, pick a unit within 6. That unit cannot fight until the end of the phase.
My God.
That's terrifying, man. That's good.
So good.
It's so good. I played against Tau Army, and that was awesome.
Yeah.
So good. Holy shit.
But even
Yeah, it was
just
really good.
forcing something like, oh, you charge me, you're going last. Done.
Yeah, now it does, if both units have... So, if basically it would work well if an enemy charges you with 2 units, you could pick one unit to fight a normal, and then one they get to pick the first unit or whatever. So it's great when it's a protracted combat. So I like that a lot. The Spirit Sting, it's a Dark Creed pistol. You can't take invulnerable saves against it. And it's a 3-shot pistol. The Flensing Blade is a Coven of 12 blade that is D3 damage and add +1 to wound rolls. And when you're fighting characters, it just does straight 3 damage. So it wounds basically, it's a poison weapon that wounds on a 3+. It's -2 AP, and against characters, it does 3 damage.
Okay. So out of all those items, you get 1 for your army.
Right.
And then you can buy up to 2 more with 3 CP.
Right.
So which one do you take in your army list if you have to write it in your list?
I'd take the Writ of the Living Muse.
Okay.
Because I love that reroll. The reroll 1s to wound is, I think, very strong. And I think any army worth their salt will have at least 2 Archons.
Mm-hmm. And then what do you take with your CP? Or I guess you only take them in some games.
Well, it would be based on matchup. So if I'm playing against Tau, I'd run the Vexita Mask. If I'm playing against something that has a lot of Psychers, I'd run the Helm of Spite. Or if I wanted to run my Homunculus up to tank a lot of damage, I'd run the Nightmare Doll.
Okay. So we'll move on to Warlord traits. If you have to write a Warlord trait in your list, which one do you pick?
Well, it depends on what you're building your list around. But my favorite one is by far Labyrinthine Cunning. It's the Cabal of the Black Heart Warlord trait. And as long as the Warlord is on the table, essentially alive, roll a d6. Every time your opponent or you spends a command point, you gain a command point on a roll of a 6. So if your opponent...
Wow.
Exactly. It's your opponent and yours, and it's any command point. So if your opponent uses 3 points for a stratagem, you roll 3 dice. If you roll 3 points for a stratagem, you roll 3 dice. And any 6 gives you a command point.
Cool. Is there any other Warlord traits that might be worth taking?
I like because I run the 3 Warlords. So I spend a command point to do 3 Warlords. I get to pick 3 traits. And my favorites are Labyrinthine Cunning, Quicksilver Fighter, which is sorry, what was that one? Hold on a second. Sorry, it's the actual Red Grief. It's the Cult of the Red Grief. It's hyper swift reflexes. You get to add +1 to the invulnerable saving throws for your succubus, which is pretty cool. Yeah. And then Diabolical Soothsayer, which is the Prophets of Flesh Warlord trait. Once per battle, your Warlord can reroll a single dice, so a hit, a wound, a saving throw, or a damage roll. So usually you save it for a saving throw. And you roll a d3 and get that many command points back. So essentially he can be a little battalion into himself.
It's pretty good. That's like... Because you're going to need to spend a lot of command points, I think. If you listen to when we were talking about which stratagems we'd want to spend, you're looking at spending, 7, 8, 9 easy in the first couple turns. So anything that gets you back or gets more of them is just gold.
Mm-hmm. Those are the 3 that I've been using pretty standardly for every game I've played. Now there's some cool ones, like if you're going for a combat-y character, you can make your Archon reroll wound rolls. But the ones I said, I think those are my favorite by far.
Sounds good. Okay, so overall, what do you think the power level of the book is? Start with you, Skari. Spoiler alert.
9,000.
9,000. 9,001. But as far as good. Is it somewhere above Eldar, below Eldar, around Nids? What do you think?
I think it's definitely on par with Eldar. I think it'll give Eldar a run for its money. Once the FAQ comes out, we'll see how it stacks up to the soup stuff, right? Or whether or not that's even a thing. But they've given us a book that is versatile, fun to play, very, very powerful, but it's not a point-and-click army. So it might not be as resilient as, say, an Eldar army, but it will hit harder than an Eldar army in some situations.
Okay, Dan, what's your...
I think it's a really cool book. I think it's probably one of the most interesting, creative armies. I think it speaks directly to the Dark Eldar style of the past, where it is entirely based on the general. Like, if you are playing this army and you are hyper good at this game, hyper good is a technical term.
Yeah, totally accurate. Totally from the dictionary.
Yep, I'm pretty sure. You are going to change people's lives by the death you deal out against them. If you do not know what you're doing with this book, I think you're going to be fine. I think you're going to be able to find things that are really cool, and I think you're going to have fun games. But it's not going to have like there's another level to this book that is going to be has potential to change the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. So my take is that this book has speed, which from playing these games for 10 plus years, that's the number one thing that wins you games. Speed, being able to get on the objectives, things like that. It has Alpha Strike, has lots of anti-tank, has lots of anti-infantry, can do an elite army, can do a horde army. It checks every box but psychic powers, and you could fill that box in with a little bit of Eldar allies. So I think it's just a good all-around book that does a little bit of everything well, except for survivability. There's only a few things that are very survivable, and the rest are just fragile. So you got to play with them like they're going to die, and then hope that you can pull a win out with it. So we'll go back to you, Skari. What kind of lists you've been running? So you had a few lists that you wanted to kind of go through and talk about a little bit.
Well, I've been, to be honest, I've played 5 games or 6 games so far with the new book, and I've been running a very similar list. I'll just kind of skim through it. It's a Cabal of the Black Heart Battalion. So I'm equipping 2 Archons with Venom Blades. So I'm not going for like much close combat ability, but it's a 2-point poison weapon that always wounds on 2s in combat unless you're fighting a tank. So they're just 5 attacks that hit on 2s, wound on 2s. It's just volume of dice. Then I'm running anywhere from usually I run about 5 Cabalite warrior units, 5-man with blasters, and then I run 6 Venoms. And these Venoms are just the staple of the army. The Cabalite warriors go inside them, the Archons stick in the other Venom in the 6th one, and they just shoot a lot and go around taking objectives and just being a general nuisance. Get the Archons out and give the Venoms reroll 1s to hit. It's been quite handy put together. Then I'm running usually a battalion or an outrider detachment of Red Grief, so advance and charge witches, and I like running a unit of 9 to 12 Reaver jet bikes with blasters, so they can advance and charge and get anywhere on the board they need to be in order to tie things up or kill things. And they've been very, very effective. Those Reaver jet bikes are no joke. Mm-hmm. And last but not least, I'm running a Coven Spearhead, usually comprised of 3 Talos and a Homunculus. And to round it all off, you have enough points to either put a couple of Ravagers in or a couple of Razorwings in. And to fill out the Outrider detachment, I usually run 2 units of Scourge with either Haywire Blasters or Shredders, because they're the same amount of points. The Haywire Blaster is very, very good against tanks, like to mop up tanks with mortal wounds, but it can be used against infantry in a pinch, because they're D3, strength 4, -1 AP shots each. It's about 9 shots per unit on average. And then you have the Shredders, which are, an average of 14 shots, strength 6, -1 AP, rerolling wounds against infantry. So they just clear out screens and chaff really, really quickly, so the Talos and the jet bikes and whatnot can target the meaty bits. But all in all, it's a fast-hitting mobile army that doesn't really seem like it. It looks very big on the table for 2,000 points. It takes up a lot of space, and it's just been good at taking objectives, dealing damage, denying, being tough to stick around with, like the Talos, and in general, just been a lot of fun to play as well.
Right on. I guess we can move on. We'll move on to Q&A, and then we'll wrap up the show. So if you guys want any more questions for Skari or anything about his list and all that, you can check him out on Skaredcast, the YouTube channel, and you can always email him. What's your email, Ridvin, if they want to get a hold of you?
Skaredcast@gmail.com.
Cool. So if you for all your Dark Eldar needs. So we'll move on to the Q&A. First one from Eric. Where are you guys based out of? We're based out of Ontario, Eastern Ontario to Toronto. Brandon Stark. How do you feel the Dark Eldar will fare in both the competitive and casual scene with their new rules? Do you still feel they will struggle like many people were suggesting in 7th? So what do you think about that, Dan? How do you feel they're going to fare in competitive and casual?
I think, like I was saying, I think there's going to be a spot for them in the top, but only for someone who knows exactly what they're doing. If you're taking advantage of every rule, aspect, and everything, if you want to make this army work and you understand it and it is something that you want, you can easily win tournaments with this book. As casual goes, I think this sounds ridiculously fun.
Oh yeah, and
I think you're going to be able to. Yeah, you're going to be able to craft so many different styles of lists. You have 3 codexes in one codex now. You can do anything you want.
Yeah. You have anything to add to that, Skari?
No, I concur.
Matt Von Bear, thoughts/uses of them as allies with Harlequins, Ynnari, or Ealdari, or should they run pure Drukhari? Let's take that away, Skari.
To be honest, now it's a toss-up. There's definitely a benefit to taking Eldari allies, but a lot of the synergy between the Coven, Homunculus Coven, the Witch Cults, and the Cabals are so good that it's kind of hard to want to not take something from the Dark Eldar book to take something from the Eldar book. If anything, I could see a Cabal of the Black Heart with either a Prophets of Flesh or a Red Grief detachment. And if you are going to take allies, it would be something like a Supreme Command detachment with, say, a Farseer, a Spirit Seer, and a Warlock Council, and say a Wave Serpent. So you can have something that can doom, something that can conceal or reveal, and something that can do a jink at 36 inches.
Definitely agree, and I think that's a sign of a good book, is that they put enough incentive in the book to want to run pure, but you could also mix if you want. So that's always a nice touch, because they've kind of been struggling to find that sweet spot where people won't run soup and they'll run something pure, and I think they kind of hit that off with the Drukhari. Bealtan, he wants a breakdown of what we might see in terms of combined cabals, cults, and covens, or which ones we like the best. We did already cover that. JS Lanu, is the 3-piece stratagem denial strat actually going to be as backbreaking as people think?
Yes.
I think yes.
Yeah, you could easily waste your 3 CP if you're just like, you just want to do something small. But again, I think it, like I said, plays into the whole codex. Like, if you use it right, it will win you the game
against some armies, and it's always an option. You have the option. So against some lists, yeah, like there's a lot of armies where it really doesn't matter. Their stratagems aren't so great. Like, you're playing Ultramarines, you're probably
not Ultramarines is a great example. Like, they fail their reroll on Gilliman. Oh, I'll reroll. No, you won't.
Oh, I guess you could even do that. Yeah. That's worth it. Yeah. Maybe Ultramarines without Girly Man. Their stratagems suck. That's what I was getting at. I think it's amazing. I would like to see this more around once per, like maybe an item here and there. Stop somebody from using a CP once per game, just to kind of be like, no, that one thing that's going to screw me. No. I like it.
I don't mind it being only Dark Eldar, but I mean that's probably because they don't have psychic powers. Like, they've given up a whole psychic phase. They deserve something a little more special.
I can see that.
Yeah, I agree. Lord Dracon on Twitter asks, are they going to spoil the meta? So I kind of interpret that as, are they counter meta? Do they fight what's good? And maybe, what do you guys think? Are they a spoiler?
I think that they will be a gatekeeper army now. If you don't have something to beat Dark Eldar, they will catch you by surprise and they will bend you over.
40K Today asks, and we've already kind of answered this, but what's your favorite troop unit? I'm going to go with witches.
Cabalette Wars.
I think my favorite... Oh, I'll go Rax. Fuck it.
All three. They're all good.
They're all good. I just like horde armies, man, and the fact you can just take those witches and run them up the board just sounds pretty awesome. And they're very survivable, especially if you get them into combat, right?
Yep, 100%.
And then we have a weird, I guess it's a pun. Do you get bonus victory points if you win while completely wasted? Sounds DEY. As in DUI, but Dark Eldar. I don't know. I'm sorry for the kid today. That was not funny.
I concur.
Yeah, not funny at all.
What are we trying to not laugh about? I didn't understand.
So awesome. I just want to say a huge thanks to Dan for joining us and Skari. Thank you guys. I think it was very informative.
Yeah, that was fun.
We reached the end.
We did. Is it really the end though?
No, because we'll have more Dark Eldar news in the future. I have a feeling.
I love it.
A certain someone only plays Dark Eldar and will continue to only play Dark Eldar.
Really?
I think he's talking about me.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right, Dan.
Yeah.
You've stuck to them faithfully for years.
Yeah, he never sold them. He never sold them for a different army.
I played 100 games in 5th Ed.
When they were good. Oh, right.
No, when they were good. Come on, they were not good in 5th. We all know this.
They were better in 5th than 6th.
That's
They
true.
were, yeah.
That's a
Yeah,
fair
they were.
point.
That's fine. So everybody can email Dan. Dan,
Yep, all
What
your
is your
questions,
email?
send them to
all
me.
your Dark Eldar emails.
It's scarcast@gmail.com.
You're the one with the ITC belts.
True.
I don't have these accolades.
I don't think he
This
has
is the
any
thing.
Dark Eldar ITC belts, though, to be fair.
It's
Well,
true.
is there one though?
I don't even know.
I don't think they
has
added it last year. I think they deleted it last year.
one. Yeah, they're like it's pretty sad when somebody's done 5 events
Yeah,
and
it's actually
has
just a bag of
34
condoms.
points.
Yeah,
34 ITC points with 5 events. You're like that's not even possible, man. You get at least 50 for being last. Yeah, this guy dropped out halfway through turn 1 because his army was tabled.
yeah, that's all it was. Yeah.
But no, it's good. They're a good book now. So anyway, with that, have a good one.
Thank you for completing this episode of CanHammer. If you'd like more information on what we do, our YouTube channel, or any events we run, see canhammer.ca. If you would like to donate to the show, you can visit patreon.com/canhammer, where you can donate and subscribe, and you'll get some sick rewards. If donating is not your thing, then just leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. That really helps us get recognized and helps new people find the show. So with that, hopefully we'll see you on the battlefield.